2 hours after giving birth to my daughter, I lay in the sterile chill of my VIP maternity suite, waiting for my husband to hold our child for the first time. Instead, he dropped a stack of legal papers onto my lap, adjusted his solid gold Tom Ford watch, and looked me dead in the eye. "I already have a son with another woman," he said, his voice completely void of emotion. "I will not acknowledge your child. Sign the divorce papers." I did not scream. I did not cry. I just smiled, pulled out my tablet, and whispered, "Then you better remember this exact moment for the rest of your life." Before I tell you how I burned his carefully curated world to the ground, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe if you have ever had to remind an arrogant man exactly who holds the power. I am Nia, 31 years old, and until that moment, I believed my marriage to Marcus was a true partnership. Marcus was an investment banker whose family name held immense weight in Atlanta. We had the sprawling mansion and the perfect image, but the reality was drastically different. I had just endured 20 hours of grueling labor. Zuri, my beautiful newborn daughter, was resting quietly in the bassinet beside my bed. I expected Marcus to walk into the room with tears of joy, ready to embrace the family we had created. Instead, he strolled in with casual arrogance. He barely glanced at the bassinet. The white envelope he tossed onto my blanket felt incredibly heavy. I looked down at the documents demanding a dissolution of marriage. I looked back up at Marcus. He was casually adjusting his Tom Ford watch, a custom gift I had purchased for him just last year. "Your boring numbers job cannot afford my lifestyle anyway," Marcus sneered. "You are always buried in spreadsheets. But I need a woman who understands legacy. I have a son now, a true heir. He needs my resources. You and this baby are just tying me down to mediocrity." His words were designed to break me. But Marcus fundamentally misunderstood who he was dealing with. He saw a tired woman in a hospital gown. He forgot that he was speaking to a senior forensic accountant, someone whose entire career revolved around following the money and dismantling corporate frauds. He called my job boring, completely ignoring the fact that my forensic audits paid off his secret fraternity debts when we were younger. He conveniently forgot that my income had heavily subsidized the lavish lifestyle he loved to flaunt on social media. I had quietly cleaned up his financial messes for 7 years to protect our family name. I shifted my weight against the hospital pillows, ignoring the physical pain of my recovery. I reached over to the bedside table and picked up my tablet. I did not shed a single tear. Panic was for people who did not prepare. I unlocked the screen and opened my banking application. "I hope your true heir has a phenomenal trust fund, Marcus," I said, keeping my voice dangerously level, "because I emptied our joint accounts exactly 3 hours ago." Marcus stopped pacing. He stared at me, a confused smirk playing on his lips. "You are bluffing," he said, pulling his phone from his tailored suit pocket. "You cannot move that kind of money without my authorization." I turned the tablet screen toward him. "As a forensic accountant, I know exactly how to manage assets legally and swiftly. The $2.5 million I earned from my recent independent consulting contracts was moved into an irrevocable trust for Zuri while you were busy playing golf with your friends last week. The remaining joint funds were transferred precisely 3 hours ago to cover my immediate living expenses and legal fees. The accounts you thought you controlled are completely drained." The color drained from his face as he frantically refreshed his banking app. His hands began to shake as the zero balances loaded on his screen. "You stole my money," he yelled, his voice echoing off the sterile walls of the maternity ward. "I will have you arrested. I will take everything from you." "You cannot steal what you legally earned," I replied calmly. "And as for that black credit card you plan to use to pay for the luxury suite for your other woman, I reported it lost this morning. I suggest you figure out how to pay this hospital bill before you leave." Marcus took a threatening step toward my bed, his face twisted in pure rage. He raised his hand, pointing a trembling finger at my face. "You arrogant, calculating woman!" Before he could finish his sentence, the heavy wooden door of the maternity suite swung open. The sudden interruption made us both turn. Walking through the door was my mother Vivian. She was dressed impeccably, her hair perfectly styled, carrying herself with the aristocratic superiority she always demanded from the world. But it was the people behind her that made my blood run cold. Trailing closely behind my mother was my younger sister Chloe. Chloe was 29, a wildly popular social media influencer who had built a career on projecting an image of absolute perfection. She was the family favorite, the golden child who could do no wrong in my parents' eyes. But the most shocking part of the scene was what Chloe was holding. Cradled in her arms was a baby boy no more than a year old. My mother walked past Marcus without a word and stood directly at the foot of my hospital bed. She looked at me then, at baby Zuri resting in the bassinet, her expression filled with profound disappointment and absolute disgust. "Sign the papers, Nia," my mother demanded, her voice cold and unyielding. "Do not make a scene and ruin your sister's family." The sterile white walls of the hospital room seemed to close in on me, as the truth settled into my bones like a freezing liquid. I watched the scene unfold with a clarity that only a mother who had just brought life into the world could possess. Chloe did not look ashamed. She stood there clutching that baby like a golden prize, her designer purse hanging off her shoulder as if she were at a brunch in Buckhead rather than a maternity ward. Vivian had her hands clasped in front of her like she was preparing for a Sunday morning sermon. Her face was a mask of cold, hard calculation. She had always been the architect of our family's public image, and it was clear she was already laying the foundation for a new desperate lie. The camera follows my eyes as I scan the room. I look from Marcus, who is now staring firmly at the polished linoleum floor, to Chloe, whose sobs are punctuated by the rhythmic beeping of my heart rate monitor. Her tears are perfectly timed, glistening on her cheeks in a way that suggests she has practiced them in a mirror. I look back at my mother Vivian, whose eyes are narrow, hard, and filled with a terrifying amount of venom. The realization hits me with the force of a tidal wave. The other woman is not some random stranger I have to worry about or compete with. The other woman is my own sister. The baby in her arms, the one Marcus is supposedly the father of, is my nephew by blood, and by some cruel trick of destiny, Marcus's own son. My mother's voice drops to a sharp rhythmic whisper. It is barely audible over the mechanical hum of the life support and monitoring equipment in the room. She says, "You will not say a word, Nia. Chloe is married to Liam. Do you have any idea how much money that man has? Do you know his family is funding your father's entire real estate portfolio? We have been on the brink of bankruptcy for 2 years. Liam's family is the only thing keeping us afloat. If he finds out that the baby is Marcus's, he will walk away. He will pull his funding, and this family will be disgraced in every social circle, from the wealthiest parts of Buckhead all the way to the South Side. You need to keep your mouth shut." Vivian takes a step toward my bed. She looks at me like I am a smudge on a pristine window, an imperfection that needs to be wiped away. "You are just a plain accountant, Nia. You have always been the quiet, boring one. Do your duty for the family legacy. This is not about your hurt feelings. This is about survival." I look at my mother, the woman who taught me to be strong, to be independent, to build a professional career on integrity and absolute honesty. Now she stands here begging me to participate in a fraud that is as rotten as a diseased tree. She expects me to be the sacrificial lamb for the family name. I do not respond to her plea. There is no point in arguing with someone who has sold their conscience to keep up appearances. Instead, I reach out and press the call button on the side of my bed. I do not look at her as I do it. The call light flashes red over the door. A nurse, young and looking like she has already worked a double shift, pokes her head into the room, her expression confused. Marcus is hovering near the doorway, looking back and forth between me and Vivian. Chloe is still crying, a soft, pathetic sound that makes my skin crawl. It is the sound of someone who has gotten away with everything her entire life and is now realizing for the first time that consequences might actually exist. I speak clearly and firmly to the nurse. Security. My ex-husband and my sister are trespassing in my room. They are harassing a patient who has just undergone major abdominal surgery. Please have them removed immediately. Vivian is shocked. She looks around the room as if someone might jump to her defense, but the room is empty of allies. Her face turns an ugly, mottled shade of red. "You would do this to us," she hisses. "You would drag our family name through the mud. You think Atlanta is a small town? I will make sure no one in the elite community ever speaks to you again. I will make sure you are an outcast. You think you are so smart with your numbers and your spreadsheets, but you have no idea how the real world works. You are throwing away your life for what?" For spite, I watch as the security guards enter the room, their faces serious and professional. Marcus tries to speak to offer some pathetic defense, but the guard steps up firm and immovable. He gestures toward the hallway with his hand. Marcus looks at me, his arrogance finally giving way to a flicker of genuine fear. He knows he has lost his leverage. He knows I am no longer the woman he can push around, the woman who would stay silent to keep the peace. I watch as they are ushered out of the room. The door closes with a soft, final thud. In the silence that follows, the weight of the room changes. I look over at the bassinet at Zuri, my daughter. She is still asleep, oblivious to the fact that her father and her aunt were just engaged in a conspiracy to ruin her mother. She is the only thing that matters now. I look at Chloe as she is being led away by the guards. She glances back, her face twisted in anger, but I do not look away. I hold her gaze until she is forced to turn the corner of the hallway. I whisper just loud enough for her to hear before the door shuts. "Enjoy Liam's money while it lasts, sis." Because I process the medical empire's tax audits, and I have seen exactly where your lifestyle is headed. The game is just beginning and you have no idea how much I know. I have seen the bills, the private jet logs, and the secret bank accounts. I have seen everything you think is buried deep in the dark. Enjoy the fall. The tires of my sleek black SUV crunched against the pristine gravel of my driveway as we pulled up to the towering wrought iron gates of my $3 million Buckhead mansion. From the street view, the sprawling manicured lawns stretched out perfectly, leading to the imposing brick facade of a house I had built entirely from the ground up. As the heavy gates recognized my vehicle and swung open smoothly, the car glided to a stop near the grand entryway. I stepped out of the back seat, the cool Georgia air brushing against my face. In my arms, secured tightly to my chest, was my newborn daughter, Zuri. She was fast asleep, completely unaware of the chaotic war waiting for us on our very own front porch. Standing right there beneath the towering white columns were Marcus and Chloe. They were not alone. A man in gray overalls was hunched over my custom mahogany front door, the loud grating whine of a power drill cutting through the quiet, affluent neighborhood. It was a locksmith. Marcus stood over him with his arms crossed, wearing that familiar, arrogant smirk. Chloe was beside him, bouncing her baby on her hip, looking around the expansive property, as if she were already planning the interior redesign. The sheer audacity of them attempting to break into my home barely 48 hours after I had given birth was staggering. I walked up the stone steps, my heels clicking sharply against the pavement. The locksmith stopped drilling the moment he saw me approach, sensing the immediate shift in the atmosphere. Marcus stepped forward, puffing out his chest to intentionally block my path to the door. "Welcome home, Nia Marcus," said his voice dripping with intense condescension. "You are just in time to pack your bags. I am moving Chloe and my son in today. This house is marital property and my son needs a proper home. He deserves the absolute best, and since I am the man of the house, I am claiming it to protect my true family." He proudly gestured toward the polished brass mailbox near the door. "My name is right there on the mailbox, Nia. I am the head of this household. I built this life for us. You think you can just kick me out of my own home after everything I have done to elevate your status?" His delusion was almost laughable. Marcus loved to boast about his social standing. He loved to stand at our lavish dinner parties and accept glowing compliments on the architecture, the imported Italian marble countertops, and the original artwork lining the halls. He had always taken full credit for my relentless hard work. He treated my wealth as his birthright, a natural consequence of his undeniable charm and handsome features. He genuinely believed that simply being my husband entitled him to the absolute best fruits of my labor. He conveniently forgot about the countless nights I stayed awake analyzing offshore tax structures for high net worth clients, while he was out buying expensive drinks for women who were not his wife. He forgot that his mid-level banking salary barely covered his tailored suits, his luxury car leases, and his country club membership dues. I was the one who funded the down payment. I was the one who paid the contractors, the interior designers, and the landscapers. Marcus simply showed up when the work was finished and demanded a set of keys. Chloe stepped up beside him, her fake innocent act firmly in place. She brushed a stray lock of hair behind her ear, acting as though she were simply asking to borrow a sweater rather than attempting to steal my home. "Do not make this harder than it has to be, Nia," she said, her voice dripping with artificial sympathy. "You can go stay at Mom and Dad's house. You have always preferred a simpler life anyway. Marcus and I need the space for the baby. You know how stressful moving can be, and we just want what is best for the children." I did not raise my voice. I did not yell or give them the satisfaction of an emotional breakdown. I simply reached into the designer diaper bag hanging over my shoulder and pulled out a thick legal document tightly bound in a blue folder. I bypassed Marcus entirely and handed the document directly to the bewildered locksmith. "Read the first page," I told the man in overalls. The locksmith wiped his hands on his pants and took the folder. He read the bold print at the top of the page. "It says the property is owned by Zenith Holdings, LLC," he read aloud. "Exactly," I said, turning back to Marcus and Chloe, locking eyes with my ex-husband. Zenith Holdings, LLC is a private corporation. It was formed and fully funded 3 years before I ever made the absolute mistake of marrying you, Marcus. I am the sole proprietor and the exclusive shareholder. This house is a corporate asset, not marital property. Your name is on the mailbox because I graciously allowed you to receive your golf magazines here. That is the full extent of your ownership." Marcus's confident smirk vanished instantly. The color rapidly drained from his face as he lunged forward to grab the document from the locksmith. "You are lying," he stammered, his voice rising in panic. "We are married. Half of everything is mine. The law says half of this estate belongs to me." "Not when the assets are protected by an ironclad corporate structure," I replied smoothly, enjoying the look of pure terror washing over his features. "You should know that, Marcus. You are an investment banker. Or did you skip that particular finance class to go sleep with my sister in cheap motel rooms?" I snapped my fingers. The heavy tinted doors of my SUV swung open immediately. 2 massive private security guards stepped out onto the driveway. They were both well over 6 feet tall, dressed in sharp black suits and moving with intense, purposeful speed. They flanked me in seconds, their imposing presence instantly neutralizing Marcus's aggressive posture. "Remove these trespassers from my property," I ordered the guards, my voice echoing across the porch. "If they resist even slightly, call the Atlanta police and press full charges for attempted burglary and trespassing." The security guards moved in without hesitation. One grabbed Marcus firmly by the arm, twisting him around and forcing him down the stone steps. The other stepped aggressively toward Chloe, who shrieked in genuine panic and practically ran down the driveway to avoid being physically handled. The locksmith grabbed his drill, muttered a quick and frantic apology to me, and sprinted toward his work van. "Get your hands off me!" Marcus screamed, as the guard forcefully shoved him toward the massive wrought iron gates at the edge of the property line. "You cannot do this to me. I will destroy you, Nia. Your father will freeze your firm's accounts for this. He promised me he would protect my financial interests. You are going to lose absolutely everything." I stood on the top step of my beautiful porch, standing tall and holding my sleeping daughter close to my chest. The warm afternoon sun illuminated my face. I looked down the long driveway at Marcus, who was now stumbling awkwardly onto the public sidewalk, thoroughly humiliated in front of the entire elite neighborhood. I smiled coldly, watching his world completely unravel. "Call him right now, Marcus. Call my father. See who answers the bank's phone." The very next morning, the heavy glass doors of my downtown Atlanta accounting firm flew open with such force they nearly shattered against their stops. My father, Desmond, marched past my protesting receptionist like he owned the entire skyscraper. He carried his silver-handled cane, a prop he used to project old Southern wealth and undeniable authority, and his face was a tight mask of absolute fury. I sat behind my custom marble desk, my fingers steepled together, watching him storm into my glass-walled office. The panoramic view of the city skyline behind me felt like a fitting backdrop for the financial empire I had meticulously built from the ground up, an empire he was now marching in to threaten. He did not bother closing the door behind him. He simply raised his cane and slammed it down violently onto the center of my desk. The loud, sharp crack echoed through the silent office, causing my staff in the outer bullpen to freeze in their tracks. I did not flinch. I did not blink. I just looked at the fresh scratch he had left on the pristine marble surface, then slowly raised my eyes to meet his furious gaze. "You have completely lost your mind, Naya," he boomed, his voice vibrating with the kind of rage he usually reserved for disobedient employees and bad investments. "Marcus called me in tears yesterday afternoon. You publicly humiliated him. You humiliated your own sister. You threw them out onto the street like common criminals in front of half of the Buckhead neighborhood." He leaned heavily over the desk, the scent of his expensive, heavy cologne suffocating the air between us. "You will reinstate his access to those bank accounts immediately. You will let him back into that house, and you will call Chloe right now and apologize for your erratic behavior." I leaned back in my ergonomic leather chair, completely unfazed by the aggressive theatrics that had terrified me when I was a little girl. "I am not apologizing to the woman who is actively sleeping with my husband, Dad," I said calmly, my voice steady and completely devoid of the hysteria he was hoping to provoke. "And Marcus is a grown man. He can figure out how to buy his own house with his own money." Desmond scoffed, a harsh, dismissive sound that transported me right back to my teenage years. Back to every time he had brushed aside my academic achievements in favor of my sister's beauty pageants. "You were always the difficult one, Nia," he sneered, pointing a thick finger at me. "Always so rigid, always so cold and calculated. Look at your sister. Chloe knows how to build alliances. She knows how to cultivate important relationships and secure our family's future with Liam. You just crunch numbers. You sit in this sterile office and play with calculators while she is out there doing the real work for this family's legacy." He stood up straight, adjusting his tailored suit jacket, preparing to deliver what he believed was his final crushing blow. "If you do not fix this mess you created, I will use every contact I have in this city to blacklist your firm. No elite family in Atlanta will ever hire you again. I will make sure your corporate clients drop you by Friday. I will bankrupt you, Nia. I will take away everything you think you have built." It was the ultimate threat from a man who genuinely believed he held the keys to the city. He thought he could bully me into submission, just as he had bullied my mother and everyone else in his life. But Desmond had made a fatal miscalculation. He had fundamentally underestimated the very skill he was currently mocking. I did not raise my voice. I did not beg for his understanding or try to explain my pain. I simply reached out and turned my large, curved computer monitor around so it faced him directly. "I crunch numbers very well, Dad," I said, maintaining absolute, unwavering eye contact. "In fact, I crunched them so well that I found some highly irregular discrepancies in the Zenith Holdings subsidiary accounts, specifically the accounts tied to the $10 million investment Liam's family graciously provided for your new commercial real estate venture." Desmond's arrogant posture vanished in an instant. His eyes darted to the monitor. Displayed in bright, undeniable high definition was a complex, meticulously tracked web of wire transfers, shell companies, and falsified invoices. I had color-coded every single illegal transaction. "Like the $500,000 you embezzled from Liam's investment funds to cover Marcus's offshore gambling debts," I continued, my words slicing through the silent room like a scalpel. "You stole $500,000 from the powerful family, keeping your failing business afloat just to protect the fraudulent son-in-law you like better than your own daughter. You funded his secret life, and Chloe's secret baby using stolen money." Desmond turned a sickly, translucent shade of pale. The aggressive patriarch was suddenly gone, replaced by a man staring directly at his own ruin. He gripped the edge of my desk, his knuckles turning white, suddenly looking very old and very frightened. "If you tell Liam about this, I will absolutely destroy you," he whispered, though the threat was completely hollow now. His voice shook with a desperation he could not hide. I placed my hand gently over my computer mouse. I smiled a genuine, terrifying smile that let him know he had entirely lost control of the game. I pressed my index finger down on the mouse, clicking the final send button on my screen. "I did not tell Liam," I replied smoothly, leaning forward to watch the realization hit his eyes. "I told the IRS. And based on the delivery receipt I just received, a team of federal agents will be walking into your private country club dining room right about noon today. Enjoy your lunch, Dad." Exactly at noon, the heavy mahogany doors of the Oakmont Country Club swung open, but it was not the usual influx of wealthy real estate developers and ladies who lunch. It was a highly coordinated federal raid. The scene inside the lobby was pure, unadulterated chaos. Women in crisp pastel tennis skirts shrieked and dropped their mimosas onto the imported Persian rugs. Men in tailored polo shirts scrambled over each other, spilling expensive scotch, as federal agents in dark windbreakers systematically dismantled the club's back offices. Boxes of financial documents were being stacked by the main entrance, a monument to decades of hidden crimes. I walked through the center of the panic with a completely steady stride. My emerald green trench coat parted the sea of terrified elites as I moved. I did not blink. I did not rush. I simply observed the destruction I had meticulously set into motion. I had barely reached the center of the grand foyer when a hand clamped down on my bicep like a vice. It was my mother. Vivian's perfectly coiffed hair was practically vibrating with rage, her eyes wide with a frantic animalistic panic. She yanked me hard behind a massive marble pillar, desperate to drag me out of the direct line of sight of the federal agents swarming the building. Her manicured nails dug so hard into my skin I knew they would leave bruises. "You vindictive, jealous little traitor!" she hissed, her voice a toxic, venomous whisper meant only for my ears. "Do you have any idea what you have done? You brought the authorities into our sanctuary. This club is the only place we have left. You are tearing down your own family. You are tearing down Black excellence in front of the entire city. You are a disgrace to your own race and a disgrace to the blood in your veins." She leaned in closer, her breath smelling of sheer panic and expensive gin. She was doing what she always did, weaponizing guilt and utilizing grand concepts like racial solidarity to mask their basic ugly thievery. "After everything I sacrificed for you, this is how you repay me." She spat, her face twisting into an ugly scowl. "I gave up everything to build this family's standing in Atlanta. Do you think it was easy making sure Chloe had those custom pageant dresses so we could secure a wealthy circle of friends? Do you think those entrance fees paid themselves? I made you wear her hand-me-downs for 5 years, so this family could survive, so we could project the right image to the people who mattered. I sacrificed my peace of mind to make sure you had a roof over your head. And now you are acting like some bitter, ungrateful child trying to ruin us all just because your husband found someone better." I looked down at the hand gripping my arm. I did not pull away immediately. I let her feel the absolute lack of fear radiating from me. I let her feel that her words, which had controlled me for 30 years, now held zero power over my mind. Then, with a swift, calculated motion, I brushed her hand off my coat like she was nothing more than lint. I took a deliberate step back, moving out from behind the marble pillar and directly into the center of the foyer. The surrounding elite wives, the very women Vivian had spent decades desperately trying to impress and emulate, had stopped their frantic pacing. They were now staring directly at us, their eyes wide with hunger for the scandal unfolding in front of them. I did not whisper. I projected my voice so every single person in a 50-foot radius could hear exactly what I had to say. "Are you mad about the IRS raid, Mother?" I asked brightly, making sure my tone was loud and conversational, slicing through the ambient noise of the raid. Or are you just mad that they finally found the specific offshore accounts Marcus used to pay for Chloe's postpartum mommy makeovers? The collective gasp from the country club wives was audible even over the shouting of the federal agents. Vivian froze entirely. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. The pristine, untouchable image she had spent 30 years painstakingly cultivating evaporated in 5 seconds flat. The women she had played tennis with, the women she had gossiped with, were now looking at her with a mixture of utter horror and predatory delight. They were already mentally drafting the text messages they would send to their entire contact lists. I held up a thick manila folder I had brought with me, tapping it casually against my palm. You forced me to wear hand-me-downs so Chloe could afford rhinestones. I continued, my voice ringing with absolute authority. But you let Marcus steal $500,000 so Chloe could afford a tummy tuck and a secret townhouse. Do not ever speak to me about sacrifices or family loyalty again. You sold me out for a pageant queen and a corporate parasite. You built a house of cards. Vivian and I am just the wind. Vivian's hands began to shake uncontrollably. She looked around at the judging eyes of her peers, desperately searching for a way to salvage the situation, trying to find a single friendly face in the crowd. But before she could utter a single word of defense or spin another lie, the heavy front doors of the club opened once more. The chaotic noise of the room instantly dropped by half. A tall, striking white man in a bespoke navy suit walked through the doors. He possessed the kind of quiet, commanding authority that only generational wealth and absolute confidence could buy. It was Liam, Chloe's husband, the heir to the massive medical empire my father was currently defrauding. He stood perfectly still, his sharp eyes taking in the unbelievable scene. He looked at the federal agents seizing boxes of country club ledgers. He looked at Vivian, who looked like she was about to pass out on the marble floor. Then his eyes bypassed the chaos and locked directly onto me. He walked past my terrified mother and stopped right in front of me, his gaze dropping to the manila folder in my hand. Vivian, Liam said, his voice dangerously calm and echoing in the sudden heavy silence of the room. Why is my family's private trust auditor holding your financial records? The absolute silence that followed Liam's question was deafening. Even the federal agents boxing up hard drives a few yards away seemed to pause, sensing the massive shift in the room's power dynamic. The camera of my mind slowly pushed in on Liam's face. He was not a fool. He was born into generational wealth, raised in boardrooms, and trained to spot a bad investment from a mile away. His brow furrowed deeply, the initial confusion in his sharp blue eyes rapidly cooling into a dark, dangerous intelligence. He looked from the terrified face of my mother to the manila folder in my hand, putting the pieces together with terrifying speed. Before he could demand another answer, an aggressive blur of motion caught my periphery. Chloe practically shoved her way through the remaining circle of paralyzed country club wives. She was sweating profusely, a stark contrast to her usual flawless camera-ready appearance. Her designer sundress swished frantically around her legs as she threw herself into the space between Liam and me, acting as a desperate human shield to block his view of my face. Liam, sweetheart, what on earth are you doing here? Chloe breathed, her voice pitching an octave too high. She reached out, wrapping both of her hands tightly around his bicep, physically trying to drag him toward the grand mahogany exit doors. We need to leave this place right now. You should not be seeing this. Nia is having a complete mental breakdown. Liam did not budge. He stood like a stone pillar staring down at his frantic wife. What are you talking about, Chloe? Why is the IRS raiding your parents' club, and why is Nia holding our trust documents? Chloe's breathing became erratic. She clung to him, spinning a web of lies with the practiced perfection of a woman who had spent her entire life manipulating reality to suit her needs. She is a bitter, fired accountant, Liam, Chloe hissed, pointing a trembling manicured finger at me. Marcus just left her. She just had a baby. The stress has completely broken her mind. She is having a severe postpartum psychotic break. She stole those files from her old job before they terminated her, and now she is trying to drag my parents down with her because she is jealous of our happiness. Please, Liam, do not listen to a word she says. She is sick. She needs to be institutionalized, not interrogated. I stood perfectly still, letting her dig her grave deeper. I did not raise my voice. I did not defend my sanity. I simply watched her perform. You know how she gets, Liam? Chloe continued, pressing her hands flat against his chest, performing the role of the loving, concerned spouse. Remember what I told you about her in high school. Remember how she completely fabricated that horrible story about the valedictorian stealing test answers just because she was intensely jealous she did not get the top spot. She makes up malicious lies for attention whenever she feels inadequate. It is a sickness, Liam. She has always been deeply disturbed. My parents have spent years trying to cover up her delusions to protect her, but this is too far. She called the authorities on her own family based on paranoid hallucinations. We need to walk away right now before she tries to implicate you in her madness. She was good. I had to give her that. For 30 years, she had utilized that exact brand of gaslighting, using fake sympathy and fabricated histories to isolate me and elevate herself. She delivered the lies with tears welling perfectly in her big eyes, playing the victimized sister, protecting her sick, dangerous sibling. Liam looked down at her, his expression unreadable. Then his gaze slid right back to me. He was waiting for my defense. He was waiting for me to scream, to cry, to prove Chloe right by acting like a hysterical, discarded woman. Instead, I smoothly bypassed my sister. I stepped around Chloe's frantic, shielding body and closed the distance between Liam and myself. I reached into the deep pocket of my emerald trench coat and pulled out a small, sleek silver object. It was a heavily encrypted solid-state USB drive. I held it out, extending my hand directly toward Liam's chest. "I am not fired, Liam," I stated, my voice projecting crisp and clear over Chloe's hyperventilating breaths. "In fact, as of yesterday morning, I am the new senior partner at the forensic accounting firm your family's board of directors hired. I am the lead auditor assigned specifically to oversee your trust's commercial investments." Liam's eyes widened slightly at the title. Senior partner. The weight of that credential instantly crushed Chloe's narrative of a jobless, hysterical accountant. I pressed the cold metal drive directly into the palm of his hand and folded his fingers over it. "Check folder C when you are entirely alone," I instructed him, my tone holding the absolute authority of a professional delivering a grim diagnosis. "Not with your wife. Not with your father-in-law. Absolutely alone." Chloe lunged. She let out a panicked, guttural sound and swiped her hand viciously toward Liam, attempting to snatch the silver drive right out of his grip. But Liam was faster. He yanked his hand back sharply, holding the drive out of her reach. He looked at his wife, his eyes narrowing to dangerous slits as he registered the pure, unadulterated terror radiating from her sweating face. He saw the guilt she could no longer hide. He turned slowly back to me, the air around him dropping 10 degrees. "What is in folder C, Nia?" I looked right past him, locking eyes with my sister, as her entire world collapsed into ash. A chronological timeline of Marcus's hotel bookings. The glow of 4 massive computer monitors illuminated my face in the darkened sanctuary of my home office. The camera of my reality seemed to orbit me in a tight, dynamic circle, capturing the cold blue light reflecting sharply off my irises. The screens surrounding me were a chaotic, endless blur of refreshing social media feeds, flashing notification banners, and rapidly scrolling comment sections. I sat perfectly still, watching the digital firestorm unfold, with the detached, ruthless precision of an auditor examining a bankrupt ledger. The camera pushed in closer, filling the frame with my unblinking eyes, as the reflection of a million hateful words scrolled rapidly across them. On the largest center screen, Chloe's face dominated the digital landscape. She was performing the absolute role of a lifetime. It was a live broadcast to her millions of devoted followers, and she had meticulously set the stage for maximum sympathy. She wore a simple, oversized cashmere sweater, her usually perfect hair intentionally disheveled to project an aura of raw, unprotected vulnerability. Real tears streamed down her flawlessly contoured cheeks as she clutched her baby tightly to her chest. She stared directly into the camera lens, her voice breaking with a practiced, perfectly pitched despair that commanded instant pity. She claimed I was stalking her. She told her massive audience that I was dangerously obsessed with her newborn son because my own marriage had imploded. She wove a toxic, masterful narrative, sobbing into the microphone, that I was a bitter, vindictive woman desperately trying to ruin her beautiful marriage out of pure, unadulterated jealousy. She twisted the knife further explicitly, implying that my anger stemmed from her marrying Liam, weaponizing racial and social dynamics to paint me as the resentful, unlovable black sister who could not stand to see her mixed, picture-perfect family shine. She painted a picture of me as a dangerous, unhinged threat to her physical safety. The comment section beside the video moved faster than the human eye could comfortably track a vicious, unbroken waterfall of public condemnation. The community was doing exactly what it had always done since we were children. They instinctively, fiercely rallied around the charismatic, beautiful golden child, instantly demonizing the quiet, serious professional. The comments were brutal and relentless. They called me unhinged. They called me a bitter, loveless spinster, a cold corporate robot who had completely lost her mind because she could not keep a man satisfied at home. They offered Chloe desperate prayers and amateur legal advice, practically begging her to get a permanent restraining order against her terrifying, jealous older sister. They validated every lie she spun, proving once again that a smiling face with a victim narrative would always defeat quiet competence in the court of public opinion. The sheer volume of the hatred would have crushed an ordinary person. It would have driven them to post a frantic, tearful defense begging the public for understanding and trying desperately to explain their side of the story. I did not do that. I did not shed a single tear or type a single word of justification. I picked up my phone and dialed the lead director of my public relations team. With a single sentence, I authorized a multi-million-dollar defamation lawsuit to be filed against Chloe immediately. My elite legal team unleashed a massive, highly publicized cease and desist order across every major media platform and news outlet in the city. The entertainment blogs, financial papers, and local gossip sites instantly caught wind of the massive lawsuit, rapidly pivoting their headlines to cover the impending high-stakes legal war between the two sisters. But the aggressive lawsuit was nothing more than a strategic, loud distraction. It was a calculated maneuver designed to make Chloe and her followers believe I was fighting a traditional battle for public opinion and financial damages, while her management team scrambled in pure panic to address the massive defamation suit. I executed the actual fatal strike. I navigated directly to the reply section of Chloe's viral, tear-stained video. I did not type a caption. I did not engage in the digital screaming match. I simply attached a single image file and hit send. It was a highly redacted legal document, completely blacked out to protect sensitive account numbers and personal addresses, but leaving just enough vital text visible to be utterly devastating. It was a certified financial ledger linking Marcus directly to specific, undeniable transactions. I switched my monitor to watch her second live stream of the afternoon. Chloe was currently sitting in her lavish living room, thanking her followers for their overwhelming outpouring of love and support. She was playing the brave, resilient survivor, facing down a frivolous, malicious lawsuit from her unhinged sister. She dabbed her eyes with a pristine tissue, offering a brave smile to the thousands of people watching her every move. Suddenly, the sleek white smartphone resting on the glass coffee table beside her began to ring loudly, cutting through her soft, victimized monologue. The caller ID flashed visibly on the screen, perfectly angled for her entire audience to see. It was the administration office of Atlanta General Hospital. Chloe hesitated, her fake brave smile faltering as the tears dried up instantly. She forced a nervous laugh at the camera, muttering a quick apology to her devoted followers before answering the call on speakerphone, desperate to prove to her audience that she had absolutely nothing to hide. A crisp, thoroughly professional voice cut through the live broadcast, echoing in the silent living room. The hospital administrator spoke clearly, directly, and without a shred of emotion. They informed Chloe that a mandatory court order had just been received and processed by their legal department. They required her to bring her infant son to the medical facility within exactly 24 hours. Chloe's face turned a horrifying shade of pale as the administrator explicitly stated the reason for the call on the live broadcast. The hospital required the infant for a court-mandated DNA test. The professional voice continued relentlessly informing a silent watching world that the test had been legally compelled under an active fraudulent inheritance clause, officially filed by the primary financial auditor of the Zenith Family Trust. The immediate fallout from the live broadcast was a digital bloodbath of epic proportions. Chloe's meticulously curated empire burned to the ground in real time, millions of viewers watching her pristine facade shatter as the undeniable reality of a court-mandated paternity test sank in. I monitored the analytics spike and plummet from the safety of my downtown office, remaining at my desk until the city skyline outside my window faded into pitch black. At midnight, I finally closed my laptop, packed my leather briefcase, and headed for the elevator. The subterranean parking garage beneath my firm was a cavern of silent concrete, heavy shadows, and flickering fluorescent lights. My heels clicked rhythmically against the damp pavement, the sound echoing endlessly in the empty space. The viewpoint of the night abruptly shifted as if a lens was tracking aggressively right over someone's shoulder, following a dark shape that broke away from the concrete pillars. The perspective was unsteady, vibrating with frantic, nervous energy as the figure rushed forward to ambush me in the gloom. Marcus stepped violently out of the shadows, planting himself directly between me and the driver's side door of my car. He looked absolutely nothing like the polished, arrogant man who had smugly packed his bags and walked out on me 6 months ago. His expensive, tailored suit was hopelessly wrinkled, his tie hung loose and crooked around his neck, and a sheen of frantic, greasy sweat coated his forehead. He was breathing heavily, his chest heaving as he cornered me against the cold metal of my vehicle. In his right hand he clutched a sleek black flash drive, waving it erratically in the dim light like a loaded weapon. "Drop the DNA test, Nia!" he demanded, his voice a ragged, desperate bark that bounced harshly off the low concrete ceiling. "Drop the test and call off the federal IRS audit on Vivian and Robert right now. Do it tonight, or I swear to God I will end everything you have just built." I simply looked at him, completely unbothered by his aggressive physical proximity. I did not flinch, and I did not reach for my keys. "You are in no position to issue ultimatums, Marcus," I stated, my voice dangerously calm and echoing with absolute authority. "You are currently living in a secret townhouse funded entirely by embezzled trust money that is currently frozen by the federal government. What exactly do you think you have left to threaten me with?" Marcus sneered, stepping even closer, trying to use his physical height to intimidate me into submission. He held the black flash drive mere inches from my face, his hand trembling with adrenaline. "I have your entire firm's highly sensitive corporate secrets right here on this drive," he spat, his eyes wide with a manic, unhinged triumph. "I have complete client ledgers, internal audit strategies, and highly classified proprietary financial algorithms. Everything that makes your fancy new senior partner title worth a damn is sitting right here in my hand. If you do not withdraw that court order and back off Chloe's family by 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, I am blasting every single kilobyte of this stolen data to your top competitors and the national press. Your firm will be completely ruined overnight, and you will be permanently disbarred and facing federal prison for a catastrophic data breach." He paced back and forth in front of my car, the desperate energy fueling his delusion. He was doing exactly what he had always done throughout our entire relationship, vastly underestimating my intelligence while tragically overestimating his own. "You actually thought you could outplay me just because you got a shiny promotion." He gloated, a sickeningly familiar, arrogant smirk, twisting his features. "You always forget that I know exactly how to hack your life. I have always been 2 steps ahead of you, Nia. It was so incredibly easy to bypass your security. You leave your devices vulnerable because you are weak and you trust too much. Do you really not remember our senior year of college?" I pulled your entire final thesis right off your unsecured hard drive, slapped my name on it, and used it to pass my business capstone while you were left crying and scrambling to rewrite 50 pages in 3 days. I almost got you expelled for plagiarism on your own hard work, and you never even suspected it was me until it was too late. You were a naive, easy target back then, and you are an easy target now. I own your digital footprint. I own you. Now pick up your phone and call off the lawyers before I destroy your life. I let a heavy, suffocating silence hang in the damp garage air. I looked at the black flash drive in his trembling hand and then back up to his desperate, sweating face. A slow, genuine smile spread across my lips. It started as a low chuckle deep in my chest and rapidly blossomed into full, chilling, unrestrained laughter. The sound bounced off the concrete pillars, sharp and completely devoid of fear. Marcus froze instantly, his arrogant smirk faltering as my laughter sliced cleanly through his carefully constructed blackmail attempt. "You think you hacked me?" I asked, my voice dropping to a terrifyingly quiet register. "You honestly believe you bypassed the military-grade encryption of a premier forensic accounting firm from your living room couch?" I shook my head slowly, taking a deliberate, powerful step forward, forcing him to stumble back away from my car. "I seeded those specific files on your personal laptop 3 months ago, Marcus. I planted them there deliberately, right before I packed my bags and moved out of our house. My entire career is built on understanding the psychology of thieves. I knew the exact moment the walls started closing in, you would scramble like a rat to find leverage. I knew you would go digging through the digital backdoors you thought you had cleverly hidden on my home network." Marcus looked down at the flash drive, his hand beginning to shake so violently he nearly dropped it. "What are you talking about?" he stammered, the remaining color completely draining from his face. "What did you do?" "I did exactly what a forensic auditor does," I replied smoothly, watching his entire reality shatter. "I laid a bait trap for a known parasite. Those files you eagerly downloaded are not internal accounting algorithms. They are rigged, restricted decoy files containing an active, highly aggressive digital tracking beacon. The absolute second you accessed them and copied them onto that drive, they instantly ping the host server with your exact IP address, device registry, and physical location." A faint, high-pitched sound drifted down the concrete entrance ramp of the parking garage. The unmistakable piercing wail of police sirens cutting through the dead of night. The noise grew exponentially louder by the second, multiplying rapidly as the harsh reflection of red and blue strobing lights began to bounce erratically off the damp concrete walls. Multiple heavy vehicles were swarming the perimeter of the building directly above us, blocking every conceivable exit. Marcus spun around, staring at the entrance ramp in absolute paralyzing terror as the screeching sirens echoed deafeningly in the enclosed space. I leaned in close, ensuring my steady voice was the only thing he could focus on over the chaotic, deafening approach of the authorities. "You did not steal corporate accounting secrets, Marcus," I whispered, watching his eyes widen in sheer, unadulterated horror. "You stole Liam's highly classified proprietary medical tech data. I used his medical empire's restricted bait files to set the snare. And his ruthless corporate lawyers did not just send a cease and desist order. They just pressed federal charges against you for corporate espionage." The flashing red and blue lights of the police cruisers faded into the distance as I left the parking garage, leaving Marcus to his inevitable federal fate. By the time I returned to my penthouse, the adrenaline had settled into a cold, crystalline focus. A slow, creeping visual push-in began from the darkened hallway of my apartment, gliding seamlessly into the brightly lit expanse of my living room. There, shattering the pristine, curated quiet of my sanctuary, was Vivian. She had somehow convinced my building concierge to let her up a testament to her desperate manic energy. She was kneeling directly on the floor. The camera of my reality orbited us in a continuous fluid motion, keeping my completely stoic, unmoving profile anchored in the foreground, while capturing her total collapse in the background. The arrogant, untouchable country club matriarch was gone. In her place was a frantic, weeping woman whose meticulously crafted empire had evaporated in less than 24 hours. Her designer silk blouse was wrinkled, her makeup was tracked with dark mascara-stained tears, and she was clutching a faded velvet box to her chest like a life preserver. "Please, Nia," she sobbed, her voice cracking as she rocked back and forth on her knees. "I am begging you, drop the arrogant act. Look at me. I am on my knees. You have completely destroyed her. Liam has frozen all of Chloe's accounts. He locked her out of the Zenith estate. She is sitting in a cheap motel room right now with the baby terrified and alone. You have made your point. You won. Now please, you have to stop this. You must call off the IRS audit. You must drop this DNA test madness. If Liam divorces Chloe, her life is entirely over. She has no education, she has no career, the baby will have no father. The baby." She scrambled forward, sliding on her knees across the imported rug, and thrust the velvet box toward me. "I brought you the pearls," she wept, flipping the lid open to reveal the heavy, luminous stones. "The family heirloom. The ones you always wanted when you were a little girl. They are yours. Take them. Take whatever you want, but leave your sister alone." Her desperation morphed into a twisted, frantic justification. She was doing what she always did, rewriting the narrative to make her toxic favoritism sound like a bizarre compliment. "You are strong, Nia," she pleaded, looking up at me with wild red eyes. "You have always been the strong one. You are built for hardship. You can survive a divorce. You survived Marcus leaving because you are smart and capable. You always bounce back. But Chloe is delicate. She is weak. She does not know how to survive in the real world. She needs Liam's wealth to protect her. She needs his family name. You have your incredible career. You have your penthouse. You have everything you could ever need. Why must you be so vindictive and take the very last thing your sister has to hold on to?" I looked down at her. Her words laid bare the grotesque, rotting foundation of our entire family dynamic. My competence had been rewarded with lifelong emotional neglect, while Chloe's weaponized incompetence had earned her absolute devotion stolen funds and a lifetime of being shielded from the consequences of her own actions. Vivian was literally asking me to accept my own betrayal to subsidize Chloe's comfort. I did not scream. I did not drop to the floor to meet her at her level. I simply turned away, walking calmly over to my kitchen island. I poured myself a cup of Earl Grey tea from the kettle, the delicate porcelain clinking softly in the heavy silence of the room. I took a slow, deliberate sip, letting the warmth settle in my chest, before I turned back to face the woman who birthed me. "The baby has a father, Mom," I stated, my voice devoid of a single ounce of warmth or sympathy. "It is Marcus. He can provide for his delicate new family from a federal holding cell. And I do not want your fake pearls." Vivian gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. I had appraised those pearls years ago during my initial accounting training. They were high-grade glass replicas she had purchased to keep up appearances when my father's business first started bleeding money. They were entirely worthless, exactly like the promises she had made to me growing up. I set my teacup down on the marble counter. I opened a sleek leather portfolio resting on the island and extracted a thick, legally binding document stamped with a heavy red seal. I walked back over to the living room and tossed it casually onto the glass coffee table right in front of her tear-stained face. It landed with a definitive heavy thud. "Read it," I instructed her. "It is a notice of absolute foreclosure. During my forensic audit of your hidden assets, I traced the leveraged loans you and Dad took out to maintain your ridiculous country club charade. I bought the debt on your house, Vivian. I own the mortgage. I own the deed. I own the roof over your head. You have exactly 30 days to vacate the premises." Vivienne stared at the document, her jaw trembling violently. The last shred of her reality had just been ripped away. She looked up at me, her eyes wide with a sudden, desperate, pathetic glimmer of hope, waiting for the caveat she knew had to be coming. "You have 30 days," I repeated, letting the absolute finality of the words sink into her bones. "Unless..." Her breath hitched. She leaned forward, hanging onto that single word like a drowning woman. "Unless you publicly admit the entire truth," I commanded softly. "You will stand on a microphone. in front of the entire city, at the upcoming Zenith Medical Gala. The camera shifted, capturing the moment in glorious cinematic slow motion. It started at the pavement, focusing sharply on the metallic glint of my bespoke stilettos stepping out of the sleek matte black town car. The lens panned upward with deliberate predatory grace, tracing the fluid sweeping lines of my custom-made emerald silk gown as it cascaded over the plush red carpet. The color was a weapon, a deliberate echo of the trench coat I wore the day I dismantled their country club sanctuary. I stepped fully into the warm evening air, and the atmosphere instantly erupted. Hundreds of camera bulbs flashed continuously in a blinding staccato rhythm, bathing me in an electric glow. This was the Zenith Medical Gala, the absolute crown jewel of the city's high society, an event where fortunes were made and destroyed before the first course was even served. A few dozen yards down the velvet rope line, Marcus and Chloe were staging a desperate, pathetic performance. They were posing for the society photographers, clinging to each other and flashing blinding, practiced smiles, masquerading as the perfect, untouchable elite couple. Marcus was sweating profusely under the collar of his tailored tuxedo, his eyes darting around with the paranoid energy of a man who knew federal indictments were breathing heavily down his neck. Chloe was draped in diamonds paid for by her husband's family trust, completely ignoring the fact that her entire fraudulent life was currently balanced on the edge of a razor. Liam, the actual heir and host of the evening, was nowhere near them. He was already inside the venue, leaving his wife to fend for herself in the public shark tank she had created. Through the blinding barrage of camera flashes, Chloe's gaze locked onto mine. Her artificial smile froze, fracturing instantly. The sheer terror that contorted her features was exquisite to witness. For a split second, the polished socialite vanished, replaced by a cornered animal, realizing the predator had just breached the final fence. But Chloe had survived 30 years by attacking first. She whispered something frantic into Marcus's ear, shoved her way past a cluster of bewildered photographers, and marched directly toward me. Two massive, suited private security guards flanked her, summoned by her frantic hand gestures. She intercepted me just as I reached the grand marble steps of the entrance. Her chest heaved, her eyes wide and manic, completely devoid of the sweet, victimized persona she sold to her millions of followers online. "What are you doing here?" she hissed, her voice a venomous, panicked whisper, intended only for my ears and the guards. "You are not on the guest list. You do not belong here. You have done enough damage to my family, Naya." I stood perfectly still, letting the cool night air wash over me. I did not shrink back. I simply looked at the two security guards who were shifting uncomfortably under my steady, unyielding gaze, and then back down to my sister. "You need to leave immediately before I have you physically removed from the premises," Chloe commanded, her voice trembling with a toxic mixture of fear and deeply ingrained arrogance. She leaned in closer, her expensive perfume failing to mask the sour scent of her desperation. "This is a $10,000 a plate event, Nia. This is a private, exclusive sanctuary for people who actually matter. Go back to your spreadsheets and your sad, empty little apartment. Guard, escort this woman off the red carpet immediately. She is a known stalker, and she is harassing me." The two security guards took a heavy step forward, their hands reaching out to grab my arms. I did not flinch. I did not break eye contact with my sister. I simply waited for the inevitable. "Stop right there. Do not touch her." The sharp, panicked command sliced through the ambient noise of the red carpet. Julian, the chief event organizer for the Zenith Medical Gala, practically sprinted down the marble steps. He was a man who traded exclusively in power and access, and right now his face was pale with absolute horror. He shoved the two massive security guards aside with surprising force, gasping for breath as he stopped inches away from me. He did not look at Chloe. He immediately executed a deep apologetic bow directed entirely at me. "Ms. Nia, I am so incredibly sorry for this unacceptable intrusion," Julian breathed, his hands fluttering nervously as he tried to smooth over the catastrophic breach in protocol. There has been a terrible misunderstanding by the exterior staff. Please, right this way. Your Platinum VIP table is ready right at the very front of the main ballroom directly adjacent to the speaker's podium. Chloe staggered back a half step, her designer heels catching awkwardly on the edge of the red carpet. Her mouth dropped open, forming a silent, ridiculous circle. She looked from the bowing event organizer to my perfectly calm face, her brain completely short-circuiting as it failed to process the reality unfolding in front of her. VIP table, Chloe stammered, her voice cracking loudly enough for the nearest photographers to hear. Julian, there is a mistake. She is just an accountant. She did not buy a plate for this gala. I smoothly adjusted the emerald silk draped over my shoulder, turning my gaze fully onto my sister's crumbling facade. I let a cold, razor-sharp smile touch the corners of my mouth. I did not buy a plate, Chloe. I stated, my voice projecting with lethal, crystal-clear precision over the flashing cameras. I am the primary corporate sponsor of the entire event. The collective gasp from the surrounding socialites and media personnel was music to my ears. Chloe physically swayed, all the blood draining from her face as she finally understood the sheer magnitude of the trap she had walked into. She had spent her life treating me like an insignificant peasant, and now she was standing on a red carpet I had literally paid for. Before she could spin another lie or formulate a single word of defense, the massive gold-leaf double doors at the top of the stairs swung open. The ambient noise of the crowd instantly evaporated into a heavy, expectant silence. Liam walked out onto the red carpet. He looked devastatingly sharp in a midnight black bespoke tuxedo, radiating the kind of absolute generational power that could freeze a room with a single glance. His jaw was set like carved granite, his blue eyes cold and utterly devoid of mercy. Chloe let out a pathetic, desperate whimper. She reached her hands out toward him, ready to launch into her usual routine of fake tears and manipulation, ready to beg her husband to save her from the monster she had created. Liam did not even blink in her direction. He walked straight past her extended hands, treating her as if she were completely invisible, nothing more than a ghost haunting the velvet ropes. The ultimate humiliating rejection played out under the blinding lights of 100 cameras. He walked directly to me, stopping on the step just below mine. "Is it time?" he asked, his voice low, steady, and carrying the weight of an executioner's blade. I looked at the man who was about to dismantle an empire. I nodded once. "It is time." The heavy gold doors slammed shut behind us, cutting off the chaotic roar of the paparazzi. The camera perspective instantly shifted to a gritty, handheld style, tracking Liam and me at a relentless driving pace as we marched shoulder to shoulder into the grand ballroom. The lens captured the blurring kinetic energy of our movement, cutting through the sea of silk gowns and tailored tuxedos like a knife. Behind us, out of focus, but undeniably frantic, Chloe and Marcus were scrambling to keep up their previous red carpet elegance, entirely dissolved into a pathetic, sweaty hustle. They were practically tripping over the trailing hem of Chloe's dress, desperate to intercept us before we reached the center of the room. The ballroom was a masterpiece of obscene wealth. Crystal chandeliers the size of small cars cast a fractured, brilliant light over hundreds of the city's most powerful figures. A string quartet played in the corner, the delicate music completely at odds with the execution we were about to perform. Liam moved with the terrifying, predatory grace of a man who owned every square inch of the building, and I matched his stride perfectly. We bypassed the standard tables, heading directly for the raised, velvet-roped VIP section, positioned right beneath the massive digital projector screens flanking the main stage. Before we could step past the velvet rope, a figure abruptly stepped into our path, attempting to physically block me from entering the exclusive enclave. It was Desmond. The family patriarch had clearly been waiting in ambush, nursing a snifter of scotch and a delusion of grandeur. He wore a forced, overly familiar smile, but the tight grip he had on his glass betrayed his mounting panic. He completely ignored me stepping into Liam's personal space, with the aggressive, unearned confidence of a man trying to play the equal. "Liam, it is excellent to see you," Desmond boomed, projecting his voice loudly enough for the surrounding tables to hear. He subtly shifted his broad shoulders, trying to physically box me out of the conversation, treating me like an errant waitress who had wandered into the high roller section. We have been waiting for you to finalize the paperwork. We should retreat to the private lounge and push that $10 million investment deal through before the night gets entirely away from us. Zenith Medical needs the capital injection, and we are ready to sign. Desmond puffed out his chest, gesturing proudly toward Marcus, who had just skidded to a halt behind us, panting and flushed. Desmond clamped a heavy hand on Marcus's shoulder, completely oblivious to the fact that the younger man was practically vibrating with terror. You know you are making the right choice partnering with us, Liam. Desmond continued, his voice dripping with a sickening manufactured paternal warmth. We are built on solid family values. That is the true foundation of our business. Look at Marcus here. He is the perfect son-in-law, a brilliant mind, and a devoted family man. He and Chloe are the absolute gold standard. You invest with us, and you are investing in integrity, loyalty, and an unbreakable family bond. Liam stopped. He did not look at Marcus. He did not look at Desmond's extended hand. He simply raised his own hand, a single precise gesture that commanded absolute silence. The string quartet seemed to fade. The ambient chatter of the nearby socialites instantly died down as they sensed the sudden catastrophic shift in the atmospheric pressure. Desmond's smile froze, his extended hand hovering awkwardly in the space between them. I read the USB drive Nia gave me. Liam stated, his voice a low, resonant rumble that carried a lethal finality. Desmond blinked, the manufactured warmth draining rapidly from his face. What drive? He asked, his eyes darting nervously toward Marcus, who suddenly looked as though he were about to be physically ill. Liam stepped closer to Desmond, his towering height casting a long, dark shadow over the older man. I know about the hotel rooms, Desmond. Liam continued, his tone brutally, even and entirely devoid of mercy. I know every single detail about the off-the-books accounts, and I know all about the active federal IRS audit you have been desperately trying to conceal from my board of directors. Your solid family values are currently the subject of a federal racketeering investigation. The color vanished from Desmond's face, leaving him looking like a hollowed-out shell. The Scotch glass trembled violently in his hand, the amber liquid spilling over the rim and staining his expensive cuffs. He opened his mouth to formulate a defense, to spin another web of lies, but no sound came out. Behind him, the facade finally broke. Marcus, realizing in a fraction of a second that the $10 million lifeline was gone and the federal authorities were likely already drafting his indictment, allowed pure, unadulterated cowardice to take the wheel. The survival instinct of a cornered rat overrode whatever lingering loyalty he pretended to have for his perfect family. He violently shoved Desmond's hand off his shoulder and stepped forward, his eyes wide and manic as he looked at Liam. It was not me, Marcus blurted out, his voice cracking loudly in the silent ballroom. The sweat was pouring down his face now, ruining his collar. You have to believe me, Liam. I never wanted any part of this. It was all her idea. He spun around and aggressively pointed a shaking finger directly at Chloe, who had just managed to reach the group. Chloe recoiled as if she had been physically struck, her jaw dropping in absolute shock. She seduced me, Liam. Marcus pleaded, his voice rising in a frantic, humiliating whine that echoed off the crystal chandeliers. She came to my hotel room. She set up the accounts. She told me you were neglecting her, and she needed an escape plan. I was weak, but she orchestrated the entire thing. It meant absolutely nothing to me. I swear to you, it meant nothing. Chloe let out a sharp, horrifying gasp. Her hands flew to her mouth, her eyes welling with genuine, terrified tears as she stared at the man she had destroyed my life to acquire. The golden child, the untouchable socialite, was being publicly slaughtered by her own partner in treason. The surrounding crowd of elites watched in stunned, breathless fascination as the perfect couple tore each other to pieces on the ballroom floor. I stood next to Liam, watching the absolute destruction of their meticulously curated reality. I reached over to the VIP table, picking up a crystal champagne flute and a silver dessert spoon. I raised the glass high into the air. I tapped the glass with the spoon. A sharp, ringing chime cut through the escalating chaos, silencing Marcus's pathetic begging and Chloe's horrified sobbing. Every eye in the vicinity snapped instantly to me. Let us look at the screen, shall we? I announced, my voice carrying clear and bright across the room. The massive motorized projector screens flanking the main stage began to descend from the ceiling, their heavy velvet covers rolling back with a low mechanical hum. The camera snapped rapidly, a kinetic visual assault capturing the descent of the stark white canvas, instantly cutting to my perfectly calm, unreadable face, and then whipping toward the sea of high society guests, whose conversations had completely died in their throats. The string quartet had long since stopped playing. The silence in the grand ballroom was absolute heavy, with the suffocating anticipation of a public execution. The high-definition laser projectors ignited, flooding the darkened room with stark, unforgiving light. It was not the customary heartwarming slideshow of Zenith Medical's charity work or a montage of pediatric success stories. What illuminated the ballroom was a ruthless, masterfully constructed forensic financial trace map. Vast webs of red digital lines connected offshore accounts, dummy corporations, and encrypted wire transfers in real time. It was a masterpiece of investigative accounting, blown up to 20 feet tall for the entire city's elite to scrutinize. At the very top of the hierarchy sat Zenith Medical's primary operational trust, the exact fund Liam had entrusted to Marcus's firm for routine management. A glowing red arrow slashed aggressively downward, tracking a series of massive unauthorized capital bleedouts. The numbers were staggering, flashing on the screen in undeniable crisp black font. The stolen millions did not vanish into anonymous ether. The red lines converged, funneling directly into a private real estate escrow account, culminating in a digitized high-resolution copy of a property deed. It was the deed to an ultra-luxury secluded townhouse in the most expensive zip code in the state. The purchasing agent listed on the document was a recently established shell company, but the primary resident explicitly named in the adjacent unredacted utility and maintenance ledgers was Chloe. The presentation ruthlessly connected the final dots, showing Marcus's signature authorizing the transfer of Liam's own inherited wealth to purchase a secret lavish sanctuary for Marcus and Chloe to raise their child behind Liam's back. A collective, synchronized gasp ripped through the ballroom, the sound of 400 members of the social elite simultaneously inhaling the toxic reality of the betrayal echoed off the vaulted ceilings. I watched the realization wash over the crowd. These were the city's titans, the billionaires, judges, and politicians who had spent decades worshipping at the altar of Vivian and Desmond. They had attended their lavish parties, bought into their curated illusion of generational grandeur, and trusted their so-called impenetrable family values. Now bathed in the glow of the projector, the entire elite circle saw the undeniable catastrophic proof of their generational grift. Desmond's entire legacy was exposed not as old money royalty, but as a lineage of sophisticated parasites. They were leeches who had finally bitten into an artery too big for them to handle. Desmond visibly shrank his broad shoulders, collapsing as the judgmental, disgusted glares of his former peers and potential investors pinned him to the floor. The $10 million investment deal he had just bragged about was dead, incinerated along with his family name. He tried to take a step backward, attempting to slink away into the shadows of the exit, but the tightly packed wall of horrified guests physically blocked his escape, trapping him in the center of his own ruin. The deafening silence was suddenly shattered by a piercing, hysterical shriek. "It is photoshopped!" Chloe screamed, her voice tearing through her vocal cords with a ragged, ugly desperation. She lunged forward, her expensive diamond necklace swinging wildly as she desperately tried to block the giant screen with her own body, an impossible, pathetic gesture. She is lying. She has always been jealous of me. She fabricated all of this because she is a bitter, lonely spinster. She spun around, her face twisted in absolute panic, and threw herself toward Liam. She grabbed the lapels of his midnight black tuxedo, her perfectly manicured nails digging into the expensive fabric. "Liam, you have to listen to me," she sobbed, abandoning the fake, delicate victim persona for the raw, terrifying reality of a woman watching her golden cage collapse. "Do not look at the screen. Look at me. I love you." The baby is yours. He is your son Liam. Marcus is a liar and a thief, and Nia is trying to destroy our beautiful family out of pure spite. I would never betray you. The baby is yours. Liam did not move a single muscle. He did not pull away from her frantic grip, nor did he offer a single ounce of comfort. He looked down at her with eyes so completely devoid of emotion that the ambient temperature around them seemed to plummet. He let her desperate screaming lies hang in the air, allowing every single person in the ballroom to witness the absolute depths of her delusion. I did not raise my voice to shout over her hysterics. I did not engage in the frantic screaming match she was desperately trying to provoke. I simply locked eyes with the head technician sitting in the elevated production booth at the back of the room. I gave a slow, deliberate nod, raising a single finger to signal the final strike. A loud digital click echoed over the massive sound system. The financial trace map on the colossal screens vanished instantly, replaced by a stark clinical black and white medical document. It was scaled up so massively that the text was legible from the absolute back row of the ballroom. The header of the document bore the unmistakable official crest of the Atlanta General Hospital Administration and Forensics Department. It was the heavily anticipated court-ordered document resulting from the mandatory swab taken less than 48 hours ago. The entire room held its breath as their eyes tracked down the official lines of text. The document bypassed complex medical jargon, landing on a bolded, highlighted summary box at the very bottom of the page. It listed the tested subjects Liam and the infant. Beneath it, in a font size that commanded absolute devastating authority, was the conclusive forensic result. Probability of Liam's paternity, 0.00%. The glowing zeros on the massive screen hung over the ballroom like a death sentence. For a fraction of a second, the collective silence of 400 elites was so absolute that I could hear the faint mechanical hum of the projector cooling fans. Then the reality of the 0% probability struck. The camera lens initiated a dizzying high-speed circular tracking shot completely detached from the rigid formality of the gala. It orbited Chloe as her legs simply gave out beneath her. She crashed to her knees on the polished marble floor, the heavy beaded fabric of her designer gown pooling around her like a deflating parachute. She let out a guttural, tearing scream, her hands flying to her hair, clutching at the elaborate updo until diamond pins clattered to the floor. The tracking shot spun faster, capturing the visceral, immediate physical revulsion of the high society crowd. These were people who survived entirely on status and public perception. The moment the indisputable proof of Chloe's infidelity and grift materialized, the crowd treated her like an active contagion. Billionaires, socialites, and politicians literally took synchronized steps backward. The camera captured the rustling of expensive silk and the scuffing of leather shoes as they retreated, carving out a massive empty circle of polished floor. Chloe was left completely isolated in the dead center, a fallen idol screaming into a void. Liam did not step back. He simply stood at the edge of the circle, looking down at his wife with the detached clinical curiosity of a scientist observing a failed experiment. "Liam, please!" Chloe shrieked, her voice shredding as she crawled forward on her hands and knees. She reached out desperately, trying to grab the sharp crease of his tuxedo trousers. "It is a lie. She manipulated the hospital records. You know how she is. Nia wants to ruin me because she has always been jealous of my life. I love you. We can fix this. We can go home right now and fix this." Liam calmly took a single half-step backward, ensuring her grasping manicured fingers closed around empty air. He adjusted his cufflinks, his face a mask of absolute terrifying apathy. While Chloe wept on the marble floor, Marcus was rapidly calculating his own survival odds. I watched his eyes dart from the glowing financial trace map on the screen to the exit signs glowing red above the service doors. The sudden brutal reality of his situation had finally pierced his arrogant delusion. He was a junior partner who had just been publicly outed for embezzling millions from one of the most powerful medical dynasties in the country, and he had used those stolen funds to harbor another man's wife and illegitimate child. There would be no golden parachute. There would be no quiet resignation. He was staring down the barrel of a federal indictment, and he knew Liam's corporate lawyers would ensure he spent the next 2 decades in a maximum security prison. Marcus did not offer a single word of comfort to the woman he had destroyed his career for. He turned on his heel, lowered his head, and bolted toward the kitchen service corridors. He shoved violently past a tray, carrying waiter, sending crystal champagne flutes shattering across the floor, abandoning Chloe to face the firing squad entirely alone. A sharp, frantic screech tore through the murmuring crowd. Vivian broke through the wall of spectators, her face flushed a blotchy, uneven purple. She threw herself onto the floor next to Chloe, wrapping her arms around her weeping, hyperventilating daughter. Vivian did not look at the glowing DNA results. She did not look at the financial trace map proving Marcus had funded her daughter's secret life. She completely ignored the indisputable projected reality. Instead, she snapped her head up and locked her furious, tear-filled eyes entirely on me. "You monster, Vivian!" roared her voice, echoing harshly off the vaulted ceilings. She pointed a shaking finger at my face, her features twisted with a terrifying, venomous rage. "You destroyed your own blood. You could have come to me. We could have handled this privately, but you had to humiliate your sister in front of the entire city. You are a cold, vindictive, loveless machine, and you have completely ruined this family." Her words washed over me, confirming everything I had ever known about the woman who birthed me. Even faced with absolute, undeniable proof of Chloe's deceit, theft, and infidelity, Vivian chose the lie. She chose to protect the golden child, instantly casting me as the aggressive villain for simply refusing to be a silent casualty in their ongoing grift. It was the ultimate, final validation of her toxic favoritism. I smoothly stepped down from the raised VIP podium, my emerald gown flowing seamlessly behind me. I stopped at the edge of the empty circle, looking down at the two women sobbing on the floor. I did not raise my voice. I did not display a single ounce of the anger that had fueled me for the past 6 months. I didn't destroy anything. I stated, my voice ringing out with calm, surgical precision. I just turned on the lights. You guys did the rotting all by yourselves. I turned my back on them, raising my chin as a sudden heavy commotion erupted near the primary ballroom entrance. The massive gold-leafed double doors swung open with tremendous force, completely ignoring the velvet ropes and the protesting event staff. A sharp, highly coordinated team of individuals stepped onto the plush carpet. They did not wear designer tuxedos or evening gowns. They wore dark, functional windbreakers and stark blue utility jackets with 3 bright yellow letters printed boldly across the back. The FBI had arrived. Liam's elite family lawyers had not just filed a civil suit. They had coordinated a massive federal raid, timing it flawlessly with the crescendo of the gala. The agents moved into the room with absolute, unyielding authority. The high society crowd parted for them, instantly recognizing the terrifying shift in power. Chloe let out a fresh, panicked wail, shrinking into Vivian's arms, absolutely certain the federal agents had come to arrest her for her part in the embezzlement. But the lead agent, a tall woman with a severe expression and a thick leather folder tucked under her arm, did not even glance in Chloe's direction. She marched right past the weeping mother and daughter on the floor. She marched right past Liam and me. The agents walked straight toward the back of the room, their eyes locked directly on Desmond. The camera instantly dropped to a low, imposing angle, executing a steady, relentless tracking push in shot that framed the federal agents as towering titans of authority. They moved with absolute synchronized purpose, their dark windbreakers creating a stark contrast against the glittering backdrop of the Zenith Medical Gala. At the center of the frame, the lens locked onto Desmond. The last remnants of his arrogant country club, flush violently drained from his face, leaving his skin a sickly pallid gray. The heavy crystal snifter he had been clutching slipped from his suddenly numb fingers, shattering into dozens of glittering shards on the polished marble floor. The sharp crash echoed in the silent ballroom, but Desmond did not even flinch. He was paralyzed, watching his impenetrable empire evaporate in real time. Desmond Sterling, the lead agent, announced, her voice slicing through the heavy air with crisp, practiced authority. She did not yell, but the absolute certainty in her tone demanded the attention of every billionaire and socialite in the room. She flipped open the thick leather folder, revealing a stack of heavily stamped federal warrants. You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, massive tax evasion, and racketeering. The two agents flanking her stepped forward instantly, their hands reaching for Desmond's arms. The physical contact broke his paralysis. The illusion of the untouchable patriarch shattered, replaced by the frantic, chaotic thrashing of a cornered criminal. "Get your hands off me!" Desmond roared violently, jerking his shoulders in a desperate, futile attempt to shake off the federal agents. He puffed out his chest instinctively, trying to project the intimidating, authoritative aura he used to terrify boardrooms and silence his family. "Do you have any idea who I am? I am a pillar of this community. I am a major job creator. I sit on the board of 3 different charitable foundations. You cannot simply storm into a private $10,000 a plate gala and lay hands on me. My lawyers will have your badges for this outrage. This is a setup." He frantically whipped his head around, his wild eyes scanning the sea of horrified guests, silently begging his powerful peers to intervene. But the elite crowd simply took another collective step backward, treating him with the exact same radioactive revulsion they had just directed at Chloe. Nobody moved to help him. Nobody even offered a word of protest. Realizing that his wealth and social standing were entirely useless against the federal warrants, Desmond's manic gaze locked onto me. His eyes widened, and he instantly shifted gears, abandoning the outraged billionaire persona and pivoting violently to his classic, deeply ingrained tactic of emotional manipulation. "Nia," he yelled, his voice cracking with a sickening, manufactured desperation. Tell them I am a good man. I am your father. I raised you. I provided everything for you. I paid for your college. Tell them this is just some terrible misunderstanding. You know I would never do anything to jeopardize this family." The sheer audacity of his gaslighting was almost breathtaking, even as the federal agents forcefully twisted his arms behind his back. He was instinctively trying to rewrite reality, demanding that the very daughter he had treated like a disposable asset step up to shield him from the consequences of his own greed. I stood my ground, my emerald silk gown pooling perfectly around my feet. I did not raise my voice. I simply crossed my arms over my chest, letting a cold, razor-sharp smile touch the corners of my mouth. "You paid for Troy's college," I stated, my voice ringing out with crystal-clear surgical precision, cutting effortlessly through his frantic shouting. "I took out student loans and worked 2 jobs to pay for my own education because you told me I was not a worthwhile investment." Desmond's mouth dropped open, but I did not give him a single second to formulate another lie. "And unfortunately for you," I continued, taking a slow, deliberate step closer to him, allowing him to see the absolute lack of mercy in my eyes. "Wire fraud across state lines to fund a mistress's lifestyle is a federal offense. The financial trace maps on those screens did not just expose Marcus. They exposed the offshore accounts you used to funnel Zenith medical funds to your private retreat in Aspen. The IRS audit was just the beginning, Desmond. We gave them the decrypted ledgers. We gave them everything." The sound of heavy steel handcuffs snapping shut around Desmond's wrists punctuated my final sentence like a gunshot. The lead agent secured the cuffs tightly, completely ignoring his breathless, sputtering protests. "You have the right to remain silent." The agent began, her voice a monotonous drone that officially marked the end of Desmond's reign. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." As the agents forcibly marched the disgraced patriarch through the sea of stunned, silent elites, the camera perspective shifted sharply. While the entire ballroom remained utterly fixated on the spectacular, deeply satisfying downfall of Desmond, a shadow moved swiftly along the periphery of the room. Marcus, his face slick with a terrified sweat, was utilizing the distraction. He slunk along the velvet-draped walls, keeping his head down and his shoulders hunched, moving with the desperate, erratic speed of a rat fleeing a sinking ship. He bypassed the main exit, knowing it would be swarming with media and law enforcement, and instead targeted the heavy, swinging wooden doors that led directly into the chaotic industrial kitchen. He shoved his hand against the brass plate, pushing the door open and launching himself into the service corridor. He let out a ragged, gasping breath of relief, believing he had actually managed to slip through the cracks of the impending federal sweep. His relief lasted for exactly half a second. As the heavy wooden door swung shut behind him, cutting off the bright lights of the ballroom, Marcus slammed violently into a solid, unmoving wall of tailored muscle. He stumbled backward, his dress shoes slipping awkwardly on the tiled kitchen floor. Two massive men in immaculate dark suits stood shoulder to shoulder, entirely blocking the narrow service corridor. They were Liam's private security detail, and their expressions were carved from absolute granite. They did not reach for weapons. They did not need to. Their sheer physical presence was a suffocating, impenetrable barrier. Marcus swallowed hard, his throat clicking loudly in the quiet corridor. He looked past the towering guards, his eyes widening in pure, unadulterated horror. Liam stepped smoothly out of the shadows, the ambient fluorescent light catching the sharp, merciless angles of his face. He adjusted the cuffs of his midnight black tuxedo, looking at the sweating, trembling embezzler with a terrifying, absolute calm. "Where are you going, Dad?" Liam asked coldly. The camera immediately dropped to a low, imposing angle, executing a steady, relentless tracking push-in shot that locked dead onto Desmond's face. From this perspective, the advancing FBI agents looked like towering, impenetrable monoliths of federal authority. The ambient light of the ballroom seemed to completely bypass them, casting long, terrifying shadows over the patriarch's table. Desmond's arrogant country club flush vanished in a fraction of a second, his skin turning a sickly pallid gray, as the lead agent flashed her badge and slammed a thick stack of federal warrants onto the white linen tablecloth. Desmond did not surrender quietly. A lifetime of unchecked privilege and absolute control violently rejected the reality of his situation. As the two flanking agents moved in, grabbing his wrists to secure them behind his back, Desmond physically recoiled, thrashing his heavy shoulders in a desperate, undignified struggle. "Get your hands off my tailored suit!" Desmond roared, his voice booming over the stunned silence of the elite crowd. "You have no jurisdiction here. I am a pillar of this community. I sit on the board of the city hospital. I create thousands of jobs. You cannot walk into a private gala and lay hands on me like a common street criminal. This is a setup. My daughter Nia orchestrated this entire witch hunt to steal my company." He whipped his head around, his manic, terrified eyes searching the perimeter of the velvet rope, silently begging his wealthy peers to step in and save him. Not a single person moved. The billionaires and socialites simply stared, their faces masks of pure, synchronized revulsion. Realizing his social currency was entirely worthless, Desmond locked his wild gaze onto me. He instantly pivoted, abandoning his righteous fury and weaponizing the classic, deeply ingrained emotional manipulation he had used to control our family for 3 decades. "Nia, tell them," Desmond screamed, his voice cracking with a sickening manufactured desperation. "Tell them I am a good man. I am your father. I raised you. I gave you everything. I paid for your college. Tell these agents this is a catastrophic misunderstanding." I stood perfectly still, my emerald silk gown cascading around my feet. I did not raise my voice, nor did I show a single ounce of the pain he had inflicted on me over the years. I simply crossed my arms over my chest and stared him down. "You paid for Troy's college!" I corrected, my voice ringing out with a cold, surgical precision that cut effortlessly through his frantic shouting. "I took out federal student loans and worked 2 jobs because you explicitly told me I was not a worthwhile investment. And unfortunately for you, wire fraud across state lines to fund a mistress's lifestyle is a federal offense." The heavy steel handcuffs ratcheted shut around Desmond's wrists with a sharp metallic snap, punctuating my sentence perfectly. The lead agent ignored his breathless, sputtering protests, reciting his Miranda rights in a flat, monotonous drone as they forcefully marched the disgraced patriarch toward the exit. As the entire ballroom remained fixated on Desmond being paraded out in handcuffs, the camera perspective shifted sharply. Marcus was utilizing the chaos, slipping along the velvet-draped walls with the frantic, erratic speed of a cornered animal. His face was slick with sweat, his tuxedo jacket discarded somewhere in the crowd. He bypassed the main exit, knowing it was swarmed with law enforcement, and shoved his way through a pair of heavy, swinging wooden doors leading directly into the industrial kitchen. He let out a ragged, gasping breath of relief, believing he had actually managed to slip through the federal net. But as the heavy doors swung shut behind him, plunging the service corridor into stark fluorescent light, Marcus slammed violently into a solid wall of tailored muscle. He stumbled backward, his dress shoes slipping wildly on the wet tile. Two massive men in immaculate dark suits stood shoulder to shoulder, entirely blocking the narrow exit. They were Liam's private security detail, and they did not budge a single inch. Liam stepped smoothly out of the shadows, his blue eyes catching the harsh overhead light. He looked at the sweating, trembling embezzler with a terrifying, absolute calm. "Where are you going, Dad?" Liam asked coldly, the word landing like a physical blow. The visual snapped to a tight, claustrophobic tracking shot. The camera bounced violently between Marcus's terrified, hyperventilating face and Liam's icy, unblinking glare as the two massive security guards grabbed Marcus by the collar. They physically lifted him off the floor and shoved him violently back through the swinging doors, throwing him directly into the blinding light of the main ballroom. Marcus hit the marble floor hard, sliding to a halt just inches from the toes of my stilettos. The last shred of his arrogant corporate facade completely evaporated. He scrambled to his knees, his hands reaching out to grab the hem of my gown completely, ignoring the hundreds of people watching him fall apart. "Nia, please, you have to stop them," Marcus begged, tears of pure cowardice streaming down his face. "I am so sorry. I lost my mind. Chloe manipulated me. She got into my head. But you and me, we were a team. I gave you the best years of my life. We were a power couple. You cannot let them send me to federal prison." I looked down at the man who had promised to love me, the man who had secretly drained our accounts to build a hidden life with my own sister. I reached into my clutch, pulled out a heavy gold-plated fountain pen, and dropped it onto the marble floor. It clattered sharply against the stone, rolling to a stop right in front of his trembling hands. "You were a parasite," I corrected him, my voice devoid of any emotion. "Sign the full custody agreement for Zuri, surrendering all of your parental rights immediately, and Liam's lawyers will instruct the federal prosecutor to let you plead down to 5 years instead of 15. Refuse and I will personally ensure you never see the outside of a maximum security cell for the rest of your natural life." Marcus let out a pathetic, broken sob. He did not hesitate. He did not argue for his daughter. He grabbed the pen with shaking fingers and frantically scribbled his signature across the legal documents Liam's lawyer placed on the floor in front of him, trading his child for a reduced sentence without a second thought. A few feet away, Chloe sat slumped on the floor, watching the father of her child. The man she had destroyed my marriage to claim, groveling and weeping like a terrified child. Her perfect, untouchable fantasy was entirely pulverized. She spun around her manicured hands, gripping her mother's dress. "Mom, do something!" Chloe shrieked, her voice echoing with absolute entitled panic. "Call our lawyers, fix this, make them stop!" Vivian froze. She looked down at her golden child, her perfect, beautiful daughter whose entire life was built on stolen money and shattered families. Then Vivian slowly turned her head, looking toward the ballroom doors where her husband, the source of her wealth and status, had just been dragged away in handcuffs. The elite crowd was watching her, judging her, waiting to see how the matriarch of the disgraced family would fall. Vivian slowly pulled her dress out of Chloe's desperate grip. She straightened her posture, looking down at her weeping daughter with a cold, terrifying calculation that proved exactly how she had survived in this ruthless world for so long. "I cannot do anything for you, Chloe," Vivian stated, her voice echoing clearly in the silent room as she dropped a massive, catastrophic bombshell. "I gave Liam's forensic team the encrypted ledgers. I signed a federal immunity deal yesterday morning." The camera executed a fast, aggressive dolly in directly onto Vivian's face, capturing the exact chilling moment the grieving mother evaporated. Her features, previously contorted with maternal panic, smoothed out into a mask of pure reptilian calculation. She took a deliberate physical step away from her weeping daughter, treating Chloe with the same radioactive revulsion the rest of the room had just displayed. The heavy beaded fabric of Vivian's designer gown swept across the marble floor as she completely severed the tie between them. Chloe gasped, her hands falling to her sides. She stared up at the woman who had spent 30 years cultivating her into the perfect, flawless weapon of high society. Mom. Chloe choked out, her voice barely a whisper. What are you saying? You gave them the ledgers. I had to protect myself, Vivian announced, her voice rising in pitch, expertly projecting to the ring of silent watching elites. She pressed a manicured hand to her chest, her eyes frantically darting around the room, desperate to salvage any remaining shred of her social standing. I had absolutely no idea what Desmond was doing with those offshore accounts. I was completely in the dark. I am a victim of his financial abuse. And as for this, she gestured sharply toward Chloe and Marcus with a look of utter disgust. I am entirely sickened. Vivian spun toward Liam, clasping her hands together in a desperate plea for clemency. Liam, you must believe me. I had no knowledge of this disgusting affair. I had no idea she falsified the hospital DNA records. If I had known my own daughter was capable of such a monstrous, deceitful act, I would have come to you immediately. I swear to you I am entirely innocent in this, and she was always a liar. Vivian cried out to the surrounding crowd, forcing a fresh wave of crocodile tears to spill over her heavily mascaraed eyelashes. She pointed a shaking accusatory finger at Chloe, who was now sobbing uncontrollably on the floor. I tried to raise her right. I gave her everything. I hired the best tutors, sent her to the best finishing schools, instilled the best values. But she was always deceitful. She has manipulated me just as much as she manipulated Liam. I washed my hands of her completely. I stood frozen, listening to the sharp, venomous cadence of her voice. It was the exact same tone, the exact same piercing inflection she had used to abuse me for 3 decades. Whenever anything went wrong in our pristine household, whether Chloe broke an antique vase, failed an exam, or bullied a classmate, Vivienne had used that exact pitch to blame me. She had perfected the art of shifting the narrative, casting me as the scapegoat to preserve her own flawless image. Now faced with absolute ruin, she was turning that finely tuned weapon onto her golden child, throwing Chloe straight to the wolves without a single second of hesitation. It was a masterclass in narcissistic survival. The sheer silence of the ballroom amplified the sound of my hands coming together. Clap, clap, clap. My slow, deliberate applause echoed sharply off the vaulted ceilings, slicing through Vivian's dramatic, tearful performance. I stepped forward, closing the distance between us, my emerald gown swishing softly. Incredible performance, Vivian. I stated, my voice echoing with absolute freezing calm. Truly, it is award-winning material. You almost had me convinced. Vivian snapped her mouth shut, her eyes narrowing as she glared at me. Nia, stay out of this. You have done enough damage for one night. I am trying to explain to these people that I was deceived by my own family. I reached into the hidden pocket of my silk gown and pulled out a small, sleek digital voice recorder. I held the silver device up high, allowing the ambient light to catch it so every single person in the room could see exactly what it was. You signed a federal immunity deal regarding Desmond's corporate embezzlement, I said, making sure my voice carried to the back of the room. That keeps you out of a federal penitentiary for the tax evasion and the racketeering. But immunity deals require full disclosure. They require you to be a cooperative, truthful witness. They certainly do not protect you from active, ongoing civil and criminal conspiracy regarding a separate victim. Vivian's forced tears instantly vanished. Her jaw locked, and a thick, terrified sweat broke out across her forehead. Put that away, Nia, she hissed, dropping the theatrical victim act entirely. I recorded you offering me the family jewelry collection to cover up the DNA test, I announced, ensuring my words fell like heavy stones into the silent room. I recorded you explicitly admitting that you knew Zuri was not Liam's child. I recorded you instructing me to lie to Liam's lawyers, to destroy the real medical files, and to help you maintain the fraud to protect Chloe's access to the Zenith Medical Trust Fund. You did not just know about the fake DNA. You actively tried to bribe me into joining the conspiracy. You are an accomplice. Vivian physically stumbled backward, her mouth opening and closing silently. The absolute terror in her eyes was a beautiful, terrifying thing to witness. Her meticulously constructed reality was collapsing, burying her under the weight of her own hubris. She looked toward Liam, attempting one last desperate plea, but Liam simply raised his hand, signaling his legal team. Two men in immaculate gray suits stepped forward from the shadows. They did not shout. They did not make a scene. They moved with the terrifying quiet efficiency of corporate assassins. The lead attorney held out a thick stack of legal documents bound in a blue folder. Vivian Sterling. The attorney said, his voice carrying the chilling weight of a legal executioner. You are being served. This is a subpoena for a civil lawsuit regarding severe emotional distress, financial fraud, and conspiracy to commit extortion against my client, Liam Thorne. Furthermore, we have officially submitted the audio recordings provided by your daughter to the district attorney. Your federal immunity deal regarding your husband's corporate crimes has just been revoked due to your failure to disclose this active, ongoing criminal conspiracy. You will be expected in court on Monday morning. Have a pleasant evening. The attorney dropped the heavy blue folder directly against Vivian's chest. She reflexively caught it, her hands shaking so violently the papers audibly rattled. A deep collective murmur of absolute disgust rippled through the ballroom. The 400 elite guests, the socialites, the politicians, the billionaires, the people. Vivian had spent her entire life trying to impress and control, simultaneously turned their backs on her. The movement was synchronized and devastating. In high society, perception was reality, and Vivian had just been exposed as a liar, a fraud, and a mother willing to sell out her own child to save her skin. She was entirely stripped of her social standing. The glittering tiara of the Sterling dynasty had been snatched from her head and crushed into the marble floor. Vivian stood completely alone, clutching the subpoena to her chest, surrounded by a sea of turned backs, finally realizing that the toxic empire she had spent her life defending was gone forever. The camera lens pivoted smoothly away from Vivian's spectacular ruin, initiating a seamless, continuous panning shot that locked entirely onto Liam. He stepped forward into the harsh, ambient light of the ballroom, casually securing the center button of his midnight blue tuxedo jacket. He moved with the effortless, predatory grace of a man who had been born into a level of wealth and power that the Sterlings could only desperately attempt to mimic. He walked calmly past the weeping, hyperventilating Chloe, his gaze fixed straight ahead, completely, refusing to offer her a single downward glance. To him, she was no longer a wife, a partner, or even a human being. She was a hazardous liability, a toxic asset that had just been successfully and ruthlessly liquidated. But Chloe refused to be erased. With a sudden animalistic shriek, she lunged across the polished marble floor. Her manicured hands clamped desperately around Liam's left ankle, halting his exit with a jarring physical jolt. The heavy beaded fabric of her ruined designer dress tore audibly as she dragged her body forward, completely abandoning any remaining shred of her carefully cultivated high society dignity. The crowd of elites audibly gasped, stepping even further back, repulsed by the visceral display of begging. "Liam, please," Chloe wailed, her tear-streaked face looking up at him, her makeup smeared into dark, ugly streaks across her pale cheeks. "You cannot do this to me. I can change. I can be a good wife. I will do whatever you want. The baby loves you. Zuri thinks of you as her real father." She gripped his tailored trouser leg tighter, her knuckles turning bone white with the sheer force of her panic. Realizing that genuine emotion was failing to move him, Chloe immediately shifted gears, resorting to the one manipulative tactic she believed still held power over him. Her voice dropped into a frantic, calculating whisper that echoed sharply in the deathly quiet ballroom. "Think of the optics, Liam," she hissed, her eyes wide and manic. "Think of your precious public image. You love being the savior. Your entire family brand is built on swooping in and rescuing people. The press will completely crucify you if you walk away from a helpless mother and a beautiful, innocent child. You need me for your philanthropic image. We need you. You cannot just abandon us to this federal scandal. You have to save me." Liam stopped perfectly still. He did not kick her away. He did not raise his voice, nor did he show a single flicker of the anger or guilt she was so desperately trying to provoke. Instead, he slowly bent down. The camera tracked his movement, capturing the absolute chilling emptiness in his ice-blue eyes. With terrifying clinical gentleness, he grasped her wrists. He did not yank or pull. He methodically peeled her grasping manicured fingers off his ankle one by one, treating her touch as if it were a highly contagious pathogen. "My family builds hospitals, Chloe." Liam stated, his voice a low, perfectly modulated hum that carried devastating weight across the silent room. He released her hands, letting them drop uselessly onto the cold stone floor. "We cure diseases. We invest in the future. We do not fund parasites." He stood back up to his full height, casually brushing a microscopic speck of dust from his trouser leg. He turned away from the sobbing, broken wreck of his soon-to-be ex-wife and locked his gaze directly on me. The shift in his demeanor was instantaneous, transitioning from icy absolute detachment to sharp professional respect. He looked at me not as an in-law, but as a corporate equal who had just executed a flawless hostile takeover. "Brilliant work," Ms. Nia Liam said, offering me a slow, deliberate nod of approval. He adjusted his diamond cufflinks, fully acknowledging the trap I had meticulously laid and sprung on his behalf. "Your strategic foresight and absolute discretion are exactly what Zenith Medical requires to navigate this impending federal fallout. The primary consulting contract is yours for the next 10 years. Have your legal team send over the finalized paperwork to my office on Monday morning." Without waiting for a response, Liam turned on his heel and strode toward the main exit. The elite crowd parted for him like the Red Sea, offering him a wide, respectful berth. The massive gold-leafed double doors swung open for him, and he vanished into the cool night air, leaving the absolute smoking wreckage of the Sterling dynasty behind him. The heavy doors clicked shut, sealing the ballroom in a breathless, suffocating silence. Chloe was left utterly isolated, crumpled on the marble floor in the dead center of the room. She was a broken, weeping mess of torn silk, scattered diamonds, and ruined ambitions. She buried her face in her hands, her shoulders heaving with ragged, uncontrollable sobs, as the reality of her total destruction finally settled over her. She had no husband, no secret lover, no trust fund, and no mother to bail her out. I did not step back. I did not offer my hand. I did not offer a single word of comfort. I simply stood over her, my emerald gown catching the glittering light of the chandeliers. I looked down at the fallen golden child, the sister who had spent my entire life stealing from me, belittling me, and trying to erase my existence. The transition was absolute and undeniable. I stood tall, holding the 10-year contract, the professional victory, and every ounce of the power. Chloe lay at my feet in the ruins of her own making, holding absolutely nothing. It was the ultimate permanent role reversal. The camera executed a harsh, jarring jump cut, slicing away from the glittering ruins of the gala and thrusting directly into the blinding, unforgiving daylight of the following morning. A smooth, continuous tracking shot began to pull backward, moving steadily down the sweeping cobblestone driveway of the Sterling estate. The sprawling mansion, usually a pristine monument to generational wealth, was currently the site of a brutal, industrialized dismantling. It was not a careful, dignified relocation. It was a court-ordered federal seizure. Heavy-duty moving trucks were parked haphazardly across the manicured lawn, their diesel engines idling loudly. Burly men in utility shirts were aggressively hauling priceless antique sideboards, rolled-up Persian rugs, and velvet armchairs out through the propped-open mahogany front doors, tossing the luxury items into the cavernous backs of the trucks like worthless scrap. Inside the cavernous marble foyer, Vivienne was actively unraveling. The terrifying, calculating matriarch from the night before had been completely obliterated by the sheer speed of her downfall. She wore a rumpled silk robe, her perfectly coiffed hair now a frantic, tangled mess around her pale, unmade face. She was on her knees on the floor, surrounded by a dozen open leather suitcases, frantically shoving whatever designer dresses and jewelry boxes she could reach into the bags. A bank-appointed liquidator in a cheap gray suit stood impassively near the grand staircase holding a clipboard and quietly informing her that she had exactly 12 minutes before the local sheriff arrived to permanently padlock the doors. Vivienne snatched her cell phone from the floor, her manicured fingers trembling violently as she stabbed the screen. She pressed the phone to her ear, pacing like a trapped, panicked animal amidst the chaos of the movers. When the line finally connected, the dam broke. She did not ask for help. She demanded it. "Nia, you have to stop them right now!" Vivienne shrieked, her voice echoing shrilly off the stripped, empty walls of her former palace. Desmond's accounts are entirely frozen. The feds seized the holding companies at dawn, and the bank is foreclosing on the house because of the racketeering liens. You have that new 10-year contract with Zenith Medical. You have the capital. Call Liam's lawyers. Wire the funds to the bank immediately. Make these animals get out of my house. She paused, gasping for breath, her eyes darting wildly as a pair of movers carried a massive gilded mirror past her. When she received nothing but silence on the other end of the line, her panic violently morphed into a desperate, toxic guilt trip. "You cannot do this to your mother!" Vivienne screamed into the receiver, her voice cracking with a raw, ugly desperation. "You have the power now. You have to fix this. I gave you life. You owe me." The camera executed a sharp, immediate cut, leaving the frantic noise of the foreclosure and landing directly in Nia's kitchen. The contrast was absolutely staggering. The space was a haven of pristine, undisturbed peace. Warm morning sunlight streamed across the spotless white marble countertops. Soft acoustic music played from a smart speaker. Nia sat calmly at the kitchen island, looking completely refreshed, dressed in a comfortable cashmere sweater. She was holding a small silver spoon, smoothly feeding mashed sweet potatoes to baby Zuri, who sat happily in a high chair. Zuri giggled, waving her small hands, entirely unaware of the catastrophic storm that had just wiped out the people who had abandoned her. Nia did not flinch at the screaming radiating from the phone resting on the counter. She did not look angry, nor did she look triumphant. She looked completely, fundamentally unbothered. She reached out with a soft cloth and gently wiped a speck of food from Zuri's chin, smiling warmly at the baby before picking up the phone. "You gave me life," Nia replied, her voice a smooth, icy calm that cut infinitely deeper than any amount of screaming ever could. "But you gave Chloe everything else. My money is staying exactly where it belongs. Enjoy the Motel Vivienne. I hear they have great complimentary coffee." Nia calmly pressed the red button ending the call and casually tossed the phone onto the counter, permanently severing her connection to the woman who had tormented her for 30 years. She turned her attention entirely back to the smiling baby in front of her. Back in the barren foyer of the Sterling mansion, the dial tone buzzed harshly against Vivienne's ear. Her jaw dropped. Her eyes widened in absolute shock as her final desperate lifeline was abruptly severed. Her hand went limp and the expensive smartphone slipped from her fingers, clattering loudly against the cold marble floor. Before she could even process the finality of the rejection, a sudden loud mechanical grinding noise shattered the air outside. Vivienne snapped her head toward the open front doors. Out on the circular driveway, a heavy-duty commercial tow truck had just backed up aggressively to her pristine silver Mercedes Maybach. A man in a neon safety vest was already securing heavy, thick steel chains around the front axle of the luxury vehicle. Vivienne rushed out onto the front porch, her breath catching in her throat, completely paralyzed by the sheer, highly visible humiliation of the repossession. Neighbors were already standing at the edge of their manicured lawns watching the wealthy matriarch being publicly stripped of her assets. As the powerful winch engaged, hoisting the front wheels of the Mercedes brutally into the air, a shadow detached itself from the bottom of the steep driveway. Vivian's wide, horrified gaze tracked downward. Trudging slowly up the incline was Chloe. The golden child was utterly unrecognizable. She was not wearing her custom designer heels or a tailored coat. She was wearing scuffed sneakers and an oversized, wrinkled sweatshirt, dragging a single heavy suitcase behind her. Her makeup was entirely washed away, leaving her face pale, blotchy, and hollowed out by pure exhaustion. She clutched her baby tightly against her chest. She had been thrown out of Liam's penthouse by his security team without a single dollar to her name, and she had walked miles to get back to the only sanctuary she believed she had left. Chloe stopped dead in her tracks, halfway up the driveway. She stared blankly at the roaring tow truck hauling away the Mercedes, then looked at the federal contractors marching out of the house, carrying her mother's antique side tables. Slowly, she lifted her head and met Vivian's horrified, silent gaze. In that single devastating exchange of looks, the absolute totality of their ruin finally settled over them. The empire was liquidated. The lifelong grift was over. The two women who had spent their entire lives stepping on everyone else to stay at the top of the social ladder were now standing in the driveway completely and entirely homeless. The camera abruptly cut from the pathetic, grounded reality of the foreclosed Sterling driveway, soaring upward into the bright, endless expanse of the Atlanta skyline. We executed a sweeping, high-altitude crane shot that glided effortlessly over the bustling downtown traffic, locking onto the gleaming architectural glass facade of my newly established corporate headquarters. The lens pushed forward smoothly, penetrating the floor-to-ceiling windows of the top floor, seamlessly transitioning into the pristine, climate-controlled environment of my executive boardroom. I sat at the exact head of a massive, custom-built mahogany conference table, flanked by my own team of high-powered, impeccably dressed attorneys. The morning sunlight poured over my shoulders, casting a brilliant, authoritative glow across the vast room. I was no longer the discarded daughter or the betrayed wife shrinking in the shadows of the Sterling dynasty. I was the absolute matriarch of my own empire. Sitting at the opposite end of the vast table was Marcus. He looked significantly diminished, drowning in a cheap, off-the-rack suit that hung loosely from his shrinking frame. The stress of his impending criminal liability had aged him a decade in a matter of days. He kept his eyes fixed firmly on the polished wood grain, entirely unable to handle the crushing weight of my gaze. Beside him sat his new defense attorney, a slick, over-cologned man named Vance. Vance exuded the kind of desperate, aggressive sleaze that only bottom-tier fixers possessed. He was completely out of his depth in my boardroom, surrounded by elite corporate litigators, but he attempted to mask his glaring insecurity with loud, abrasive bluster. Vance aggressively slapped a thin, pitifully inadequate stack of papers onto the table, pushing them roughly toward the center. He leaned back in his leather chair, crossing his arms with a smug, highly manufactured grin, treating the negotiation like a simple shakedown. "We are offering you a highly generous exit strategy here," Nia Vance announced, completely ignoring basic professional courtesy and addressing me by my first name to assert dominance. "Marcus is willing to accept a clean 50% split of all your current corporate assets, plus a modest monthly alimony stipend, to maintain the lifestyle to which he has become accustomed during your marriage. In exchange, he will sign the finalized divorce decree without dragging you through a highly publicized, incredibly messy court battle." I remained perfectly still, letting his ridiculous demands echo into the quiet room. Vance took my silence for weakness. He leaned forward, placing his hands flat on the table, attempting to utilize a predatory, intimidating posture. "You need to be completely pragmatic about this situation." Vance continued, his tone dripping with condescension. "A drawn-out, bitter divorce trial is not going to play well for you in the press. Think about the optics. A single black mother in Atlanta aggressively hoarding wealth and punishing her struggling ex-husband. The media will absolutely have a field day painting you with the angry black woman narrative. You will lose your corporate sponsorships. Your new clients will jump ship to avoid the drama. The public will turn on you instantly. Sign the settlement, pay Marcus what he is legally owed as your former partner, and save yourself the catastrophic public humiliation. I did not flinch. I did not break eye contact. I did not raise my voice, nor did I offer Vance the panicked, emotional reaction he was so desperately trying to provoke. Society had spent my entire life expecting me to shrink, to apologize, to surrender my peace, to accommodate the egos of inferior men. But that version of me was completely dead. I simply took a slow, deliberate sip from my crystal water glass and set it down without making a sound. I looked at Marcus, who physically flinched under my scrutiny. I turned my attention back to the sweating, overconfident lawyer. My lead attorney, a razor-sharp litigator with decades of ruthless corporate experience, did not even bother to speak. She simply slid a single heavily redacted piece of paper across the mahogany table, tracking it with perfect precision until it stopped exactly in front of Vance's hands. "My narrative is not up for debate, Vance," I stated, my voice echoing with a cold, surgical precision that stripped the oxygen straight out of the room. "The media is currently obsessed with a completely different story. My narrative is self-made millionaire who caught a felon." I pointed a single manicured finger at the document resting under his hands. That single sheet of paper details the exact offshore routing numbers Marcus used to funnel Zenith Medical Trust funds into Chloe's private accounts. It contains time-stamped wire transfers, forged digital signatures, and undeniable proof of grand larceny and corporate embezzlement. Marcus is not looking at a favorable alimony ruling from a sympathetic family court judge. He is looking at a minimum of 20 years of federal time in a maximum security penitentiary. I leaned forward, resting my forearms on the table, asserting total and absolute dominance over the space. "If your client does not sign this waiver immediately, completely surrendering any and all claims to alimony asset division or future financial support, I will instruct my legal team to release the unredacted files directly to the district attorney before you even reach the lobby elevator. You will leave this room with absolutely nothing, or your client will leave in handcuffs. The choice is entirely yours." Vance froze. He looked down at the paper, his eyes frantically scanning the dense columns of irrefutable financial data. The smug, abrasive confidence completely evaporated from his face, replaced by a sickly, terrified gray pallor. He was a sleazy divorce lawyer looking for a quick settlement payout, not a federal criminal defense attorney equipped to handle a massive corporate fraud scandal. He instantly recognized the catastrophic radioactive danger sitting in front of him. Vance did not consult his client. He did not attempt to negotiate a middle ground. He did not say a single word in Marcus's defense. He frantically shoved the paper back toward his client, snatched up his belongings, and snapped his leather briefcase shut. Without looking back, Vance pushed his chair away from the table and practically bolted for the boardroom doors, completely abandoning the embezzler to his inevitable fate. I sat back in my chair, folding my hands perfectly together on the table. I watched Marcus sit in the vast, empty space left by his fleeing attorney. His shoulders collapsed, his head hanging in total, absolute defeat. He finally realized that he had vastly underestimated the woman he had betrayed. I had officially and permanently crushed the last remaining threat to my empire. The camera executed a fast, aggressive dolly-in directly onto Vivian's face, capturing the exact chilling moment the grieving, overwhelmed mother completely evaporated. Her features, previously contorted with maternal panic, instantly smoothed out into a mask of pure reptilian calculation. She took a deliberate physical step away from her weeping daughter, treating Chloe with the same radioactive revulsion the rest of the room had just displayed. The heavy beaded fabric of Vivian's designer gown swept across the marble floor as she completely severed the tie between them. Chloe gasped, her hands falling uselessly to her sides. She stared up at the woman who had spent 30 years cultivating her into the perfect, flawless weapon of high society. "Mom," Chloe choked out, her voice barely a whisper. "What are you saying?" "You gave them the ledgers." "I had to protect myself," Vivian announced, her voice rising in pitch, expertly projecting to the ring of silent watching elites. She pressed a manicured hand to her chest, her eyes frantically darting around the room, desperate to salvage any remaining shred of her social standing. I had absolutely no idea what Desmond was doing with those offshore accounts. I was completely in the dark. I am a victim of his financial abuse. And as for this, she gestured sharply toward Chloe and Marcus with a look of utter theatrical disgust. I am entirely sickened. Vivian spun toward Liam, clasping her hands together in a desperate plea for clemency. Liam, you must believe me. I had absolutely no knowledge of this disgusting affair. I had no idea she falsified the hospital DNA records. If I had known my own daughter was capable of such a monstrous, deceitful act, I would have come to you immediately. I swear to you, I am entirely innocent in this. She was always a liar. Vivian cried out to the surrounding crowd, forcing a fresh wave of crocodile tears to spill over her heavily mascaraed eyelashes. She pointed a shaking accusatory finger at Chloe, who was now sobbing uncontrollably on the floor. I tried to raise her right. I gave her everything. I hired the best tutors, sent her to the best finishing schools, instilled the absolute best values. But she was always deceitful. She has manipulated me just as much as she manipulated Liam. I washed my hands of her completely. I stood frozen, listening to the sharp, venomous cadence of her voice. It was the exact same tone, the exact same piercing inflection she had used to abuse me for 3 decades. Whenever anything went wrong in our pristine household, whether Chloe broke an antique vase, failed an exam, or bullied a classmate, Vivian had used that exact pitch to blame me. She had perfected the art of shifting the narrative, casting me as the scapegoat to preserve her own flawless image. Now, faced with absolute ruin, she was turning that finely tuned weapon onto her golden child, throwing Chloe straight to the wolves without a single second of hesitation. It was a masterclass in narcissistic survival. The sheer silence of the ballroom amplified the sound of my hands coming together. Clap, clap, clap. My slow, deliberate applause echoed sharply off the vaulted ceilings, slicing through Vivian's dramatic, tearful performance. I stepped forward, closing the distance between us, my emerald gown swishing softly. Incredible performance, Vivian. I stated, my voice ringing out with absolute freezing calm. Truly, it is award-winning material. You almost had me convinced. Vivian snapped her mouth shut, her eyes narrowing as she glared at me. Nia, stay out of this. You have done enough damage for one night. I am trying to explain to these people that I was deceived by my own family. I reached into the hidden pocket of my silk gown and pulled out a small, sleek digital voice recorder. I held the silver device up high, allowing the ambient light to catch it, so every single person in the room could see exactly what it was. You signed a federal immunity deal regarding Desmond's corporate embezzlement, I said, making sure my voice carried to the back of the room. That keeps you out of a federal penitentiary for the tax evasion and the racketeering. But immunity deals require full disclosure. They require you to be a cooperative, truthful witness. They certainly do not protect you from active, ongoing civil and criminal conspiracy regarding a separate victim. Vivian's forced tears instantly vanished. Her jaw locked, and a thick, terrified sweat broke out across her forehead. Put that away, Nia, she hissed, dropping the theatrical victim act entirely. But I recorded you offering me the family jewelry collection to cover up the DNA test, I announced, ensuring my words fell like heavy stones into the silent room. I recorded you explicitly admitting that you knew Zuri was not Liam's child. I recorded you instructing me to lie to Liam's lawyers, to destroy the real medical files, and to help you maintain the fraud to protect Chloe's access to the Zenith Medical Trust Fund. You did not just know about the fake DNA. You actively tried to bribe me into joining the conspiracy. You are an accomplice. Vivian physically stumbled backward, her mouth opening and closing silently. The absolute terror in her eyes was a beautiful, terrifying thing to witness. Her meticulously constructed reality was collapsing, burying her under the weight of her own hubris. She looked toward Liam, attempting one last desperate plea, but Liam simply raised his hand, signaling his legal team. 2 men in immaculate gray suits stepped forward from the shadows. They did not shout. They did not make a scene. They moved with the terrifying quiet efficiency of corporate assassins. The lead attorney held out a thick stack of legal documents bound in a blue folder. Vivian Sterling, the attorney said, his voice carrying the chilling weight of a legal executioner. You are being served. This is a subpoena for a civil lawsuit regarding severe emotional distress, financial fraud, and conspiracy to commit extortion against my client Liam Thorne. Furthermore, we have officially submitted the audio recordings provided by your daughter to the district attorney. Your federal immunity deal regarding your husband's corporate crimes has just been revoked due to your failure to disclose this active, ongoing criminal conspiracy. You will be expected in court on Monday morning. Have a pleasant evening. The attorney dropped the heavy blue folder directly against Vivian's chest. She reflexively caught it, her hands shaking so violently the papers audibly rattled. A deep collective murmur of absolute disgust rippled through the ballroom. The 400 elite guests, the socialites, the politicians, the billionaires, the people. Vivian had spent her entire life trying to impress and control, simultaneously turned their backs on her. The movement was synchronized and devastating. In high society, perception was reality, and Vivian had just been exposed as a liar, a fraud, and a mother willing to sell out her own child to save her skin. She was entirely stripped of her social standing. The glittering tiara of the Sterling dynasty had been snatched from her head and crushed into the marble floor. Vivian stood completely alone, clutching the subpoena to her chest, surrounded by a sea of turned backs, finally realizing that the toxic empire she had spent her life defending was gone forever.